Well, anyway, he would probably appreciate since
I think we're live again. So I just warn you because I didn't know how personal you was going to get with this bit of private conversation.
That's fine. Take it from the top, and then we'll start the video from then. Okay.
Right. Say all that rubbish again, then.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Gin and Tonic Show, panel discussion show about Islam in the Middle East. We're joined by myself, Atheismo, the Rationalizer, Klingschor, and filling in for William Lane Craig, who was unable to attend, we have Professor PZ Myers, host of the popular pro-science anti-creationism blog Farangula. Thank you for joining us, Professor.
Hi there. Glad to be here.
Thank you very much. Now, if anyone wants to join the show and talk to the panel, you can discuss what we're discussing at the time or bring up a topic of your own. Please send a contact request to the Gin and Tonic Show on Skype. Do not call into the show or we will block you. That disrupts the flow of the show. Send the friend request along with how you would like to be introduced and what you'd like to be discussed, and we will call you when we're ready to take guests. When you come on the panel, please make sure to mute and minimize the Blog TV window or Ustream if you're watching that, because there's a delay and you'll hear an echo of yourself, which will disorient you and disrupt the flow of the show. All callers and participants on the show are advised that the show is pre-recorded and uploaded. It is broadcast live on both Ustream and Blog TV, and in addition is going to be uploaded later onto YouTube so that no one can claim that they did not know that they were being recorded. Okay, so normally I start with a news topic, but since we have a special guest, I have a special beginning. This is a question for Professor Myers. Now, this is from, but before you came on, just we made clear that you understood what the Hadith collections were and their significance. Now, here's from what's called the Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 4, Book 54, number 430, okay? This is narrated Abdullah bin Masud. Allah's apostle, that's Muhammad if you don't know, the true and truly inspired said, on the matter of creation of a human being, the human being is put together in the womb of the mother in 40 days. Then he becomes a clot of thick blood for a similar period, another 40 days, and then a piece of flesh for a similar period. Then Allah sends an angel who is ordered to write 4 things. The angel is ordered to write down the new human being's deeds, his livelihood, the date of his death, and whether he will be blessed or wretched in the eyes of the Lord. Now, then the soul is breathed into this newborn, or not yet born. It's only 4 months into pregnancy. So the soul is breathed into him. Now, my question to you is, how could the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam have possibly known that this was when a soul was breathed in and an angel wrote down the destiny of a new human being? And keep in mind, this is well over 1,000 years before this was discovered by modern Western medicine.
Oh, well, but you're wrong. Modern Western medicine hasn't discovered when the soul is breathed in. So we just have to go by the authority of Muhammad, I guess.
Oh, so essentially this is not only a pre-scientific discovery, but it still has not yet been discovered. So
that's right.
What I propose we all do, if we all just sit here and wait for science to catch up, and then we'll discuss it after that.
Yes, but we can still discuss all the other stuff. What was it?
I just thought it might be a good idea to wait for science to catch up. Yeah, okay, we could go on. Because otherwise, we wouldn't want to speak out of turn.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, we'll discuss the other stuff then.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, what is it before it's the clot of blood? So there's the 40 days, and then there's 40 days as a clot of blood. What is it before then? Is that where it's a hanging drop or whatever?
Actually, in this particular hadith, it doesn't say. It says during the second 40-day period, it is a clot of thick blood. It doesn't specify its form for the first 40 days.
Okay. So it's wrong.
I have a list of all these hadiths.
Could be anything.
I expect that's the stage, the nutfa stage, where it is a mingled fluid. I expect it slowly turns from a mingled fluid into the other thing in 40 days. So actually, does it take 40 days from the stage of being a mingled fluid to becoming a thing that clings? I mean, in real life.
Implantation is about a week. So
right.
That's about how long it takes.
So if this hadith is genuine and it's in a strong collection of hadiths, then that would really kind of rule out the interpretation that alaka means a thing that clings, because that's 40 days later, and this only happens within like 6 to 10 days or something. So
right.
we're kind of ruling out the idea that it's a clinging thing, then, aren't we? Well, we're making good progress.
Well, of course, this all started when this business between the IERA and yourself, when Adnan and Hamza confronted you outside that, what was it, some sort of a convention? And, of course, They were both caught flat-footed because apparently they did not know any of your credentials as an embryologist. Would you like to give us a rundown of your background in this field?
Oh, sure. My credentials. What are my credentials? I've got a PhD from the University of Oregon. The PhD is from the Institute of Neuroscience at the University of Oregon, where I studied fundamentally developmental neuroscience. I was looking at how spinal cord develops in fish. Then I did a couple of years as a postdoctoral student in Utah, where I studied grasshopper embryos and looking at the formation of the nervous system. And now I have a lab here at the University of Minnesota at Morris where we study zebrafish embryonic development again. I think it counts. That's developmental biology, right?
No, I think it's quite impressive, but what troubles me is, do your qualifications entitle you to dispute the authority of someone who has skimmed through a book called Embryology, the Illustrated Guide?
I think so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm well qualified to assess that person's level of knowledge.
Right, because it occurs to me that you're obviously a very, very arrogant person, and I thought that I was trying to work out who is more arrogant, the person that knows what he's talking about and finds the other claim funny, or the person who doesn't know what he's on about and has the audacity to call the person with the PhD arrogant and tell him that he's wrong despite not being qualified to do so?
I think you're feeding me loaded questions here. I think you know what answer I'd give.
I was really hoping that you wasn't going to see straight through me. I don't want to lead you to
give me something interesting.
Okay, so you've read the paper put out by the IERA. Would you mind indulging us with more like a straightforward classroom type assessment of what exactly happens during early human development in the womb versus what the IERA's interpretation has been?
Well,
IERA.
Yeah, if
the IERA is something else. Sorry.
Right. If I
don't they have their own department, the IERA, about embryological development and things like that? I thought that every self-respecting organization had a wing that dealt with, whatever. Anyway, I'll let you answer the question now.
What's this about departments, wings? How many guys are in this thing? Isn't it just sources?
No, actually, there's at least 3 or 4 of the Stooges.
Okay.
Rash, you would know that better than I would. What's the roster over there or at that organization?
I only know that Hamza is the head of research.
Uh-huh.
That's all I know. I don't know anything more than that. I only know that because he's got a piece of paper saying head of research.
They've got Adnan, and then they have someone else named something Green, like he took on an Arabic sounding name, and then
Abdul Rahman.
Yeah, Abdul Rahman Green.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a handful of them.
Yeah, actually,
okay.
There's a poster. There's a poster with all of those guys like side by side in like really pretty colors.
I still think that the Wu-Tang Clan has more people than the IERA, and they probably have a better understanding of the material. Anyway,
yeah.
So what exactly happens, just for the record, in early human embryonic development, and how does this contrast towards the Quranic passages such as you would read them, and last but not least, a contrast with what the IERA is claiming in their paper?
You've just asked me this gigantic question. I teach a course in developmental biology. We spend a whole semester just sort of touching on the general concepts of what's going on in development. And now you expect me just to tell you the entire story of developmental biology right now. No, it's not going to happen.
Well, the IERA managed to do it in 60 pages, and about 10 of those were the bibliography. So I think that they've scored a point here today against you.
You know, that's the thing. You know, I read that thing, and you have to hear the context here. I'm a college professor, okay, and this is the end of the semester, and I am getting term papers from students, and I have to grade them and read them. No student in my entire history has ever tried to turn in a 50-page term paper that's built on 2 sentences from one book. You know, I just read that thing with growing disbelief, because that's really all he's got. Is he's got a few vague references to Galen and Aristotle. He's got a very poorly understood references to embryology, but the heart of his paper is simply 2 sentences where we go from what was it? Mingled fluids to clinging thing to chewed flesh, and that is non-specific. It's very broad. It's basically got no relationship at all to what we know about human embryology. These are the very general poetic statements of somebody who's writing this great big book to gather his followers, but doesn't really know much about biology and doesn't really care. For sources then to inflate it into this grand story that's comparable in any way to what we do in developmental biology that's pure hubris. It's just silliness.
He has, though, backed off from the position that this is a miracle with information that predates science. So that's a good thing. You know, we've gone from it's a miracle to okay, it's not wrong.
And the next stage, of course.
And the next stage is admitting that it's wrong.
The Quran is not a book of science. And some verses are unclear, so we're not sure what it says. That's the next stage.
Yeah, but he doesn't even acknowledge this. When he confronted me in Ireland, he and Adnan Hashid came up to me, and they were haranguing me that it was impossible for Muhammad to know any of this stuff, that it was a miracle, divine miracle, that the Quran contained this much scientific information. And he also talked about things like mountains having roots and silly stuff like this. And now he's really backed off. When you read that paper, that's not what it says at all. It says, it's compatible with science. It's pointing the way for the followers of Allah to pursue the natural world, that kind of thing. So yeah, you're right. He has made a major concession here. Not that he's going over.
Well, like many discussions with religious apologists, they're really quite sneaky. Like, for example, we here acknowledge, after hearing what Hamza has to say and after reading the paper, we acknowledge that he has softened his position from claiming that it was miraculous to claiming that it was simply not overtly wrong. And given the arguments he's laid out, I would say that his interpretation, at the very least, is compatible with that statement, that assertion of overall, that at least it's not clearly in the wrong if you look at it that way. But they've gone on record now accusing you, Professor, as having changed or reversed your position because they changed their argument and then you changed your counter argument.
And I haven't changed my counter. I made basically they're nitpicking over 2 statements. One is, I first said in Ireland that if they were claiming that the Quran said there was a strict sequence going from bones to bones covered with muscle, then it was wrong. Okay? And what I've now said is that in addition, when you actually look at those verses of the Quran, what they're really saying is something so vague and nebulous about developmental biology that they can twist it any way they want. As was mentioned earlier here, if it were some other order, they could fit that. They could fit the Quranic verses to that. If it were simultaneous, they'd fit the Quranic verses to it. So what it's really saying is that early initial interpretation they gave me was wrong, but the verse is so amorphous that it's not even wrong. It's empty of content.
Yeah,
And
so it's
I
not
don't
that
see
you're...
that as,
So your position then, when you say it offers very little opportunity for falsification, you're not actually saying the Quran is so good that it's really, really difficult to prove wrong. You're saying something slightly different, which I won't lead you
Yes.
into saying. You can say it yourself.
I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying that it's worse. That in science we really value clearly stated, testable hypotheses. If you're going to say anything, you've got to say something where you have something everyone else can get a handle on. So we go out and test it, evaluate your conclusions, look at it. And when somebody makes a nebulous hypothesis like this, we reject it, unambiguously. It's gone. It's not worth paying any attention to. It's an old joke in science that when something is that bad, we say it's not even wrong because it's not possible to evaluate the statement. It is poorly framed. It's a bad piece of science.
So if I give you an example off the top of my head, would you say that this is equally unfalsifiable and equally accurate? So stage one, we created you from an extract of mud. Well, you can't falsify this because mud has got water in it.
Isn't it? Extract of clay? Do you know what he's referring to?
Making up my own.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's mentioned in the paper, Rash, so he would have already...
No,
Yeah.
please.
It's
the next stage, we then turned you into a blobby thing. Okay? And then, after that, he made you less blobby. Okay, are you spotting any errors yet? No? Okay. And then, you are born. So, what I'm asking here is, am I Allah's equal in a literary sense?
All right. In theory, according... Oh, did we lose him? Oh, there's a hiccup. I'll just go ahead and talk. Anyway, in principle, according to Islamic lore, this is an epic poem written by God himself, which really makes me think, there's just such a domino effect of consequences of taking that sort of a theory or proposal into account. Shouldn't a poem written by God be better on almost every level wherein the Quran fails? Or, do we have you back, Professor?
Yes, sorry about that.
Okay.
My Skype crashed for some strange reason.
It's Skype. Anyway,
I was so funny, it fell off the internet.
Anyway, we were talking about something else while you're gone. But what you're saying about the statements being non-committal, it's really quite typical of the Quran. And there was another verse that was sometimes held up as by some people, the Haran Yahya type crowd, as being, they tried to read something into this passage that it was some knowledge that you couldn't have possessed. And it was this one. It said, has Allah not created the sky that is not held up by pillars that can be seen? And when you go back and you parse that, it's like, well, wait, is he saying that he built a sky that doesn't need to be held up by pillars of any kind? Or is he saying it's being held up by pillars that are invisible? But it's completely non-committal. And it's phrased in such a way that I think this is just someone who doesn't know. This is just someone who's saying, well, you never know what you never know what the Persians or the Indians will find out, or the Chinese will find out this time tomorrow. So I better give myself some wiggle room.
Yes. They ought to just be honest and say, okay, the book is not a science textbook. It's written by people who had a very limited knowledge of the physical world. And it's reflecting their ignorance and knowledge, both of those. And so the whole business about the embryology of developing humans, they knew next to nothing about this. They had a little bit from Galen, a little bit from Aristotle. But even those two guys didn't have everything right. They were pretty vague in a lot of things. And that's all they've got. There's no divinity involved. There's no infallibility involved. It's just written by a bunch of people doing their best to understand the world. And in this case, doing their best to understand the world while not really caring all that much about biology.
Just a reminder, if you want to come on the show at any time and discuss things with the panel, just send a contact request to the Gin and Tonic Show on Skype. Do not call into the show. We will call you. Just send us a friend request, and we will accept that and tell us. Make sure you tell us how you'd like to be introduced and what you'd like to discuss. With us joining us now is DPR Jones. What would you? You didn't tell me what you had to discuss because we know you, so I didn't put you through the same rigmarole I do the other guests. What's up?
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you very much for taking my call. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you fine.
Lovely, thank you.
Sure.
Sorry, out of politeness, I'll turn my camera on. I think that we are all acutely aware that the discussion about the quality and contents of the actual paper produced by Hamza and the IERA is a waste of time because it's obviously absolute bollocks. But I think it's interesting. From the information that I have received, Hamza has a degree in psychology from a second-rate university in London. He also has accepted, when he was on the Magic Sammy show, that he is not able to speak Arabic. And yet he believes that he has the capacity to do a scientific and linguistic analysis of the Quran and produce the paper that he has done. If indeed that paper had any merit to it, it would be a miracle. And some people do firmly believe that they have the capacity to perform miracles. Normally these people are borderline insane, if not fully fledged insane. I think that the very interesting question here, for me anyway, is does Hamza actually believe what he's saying, or is he being knowingly dishonest? And before you answer, can I just say that the definition of dishonesty that I'm using is that he knowingly is trying to disseminate false information, as opposed to just saying something which is false. That's really the question. It's sort of like the psychology behind it. Is he so delusional that he believes what he's actually saying?
Yes, I think we're looking at it backwards. That to people like Sortzis, what they have is this religious certainty that their holy book is absolutely correct. So that's their starting premise: is the book is right, therefore the science has to be wrong, therefore the science has to be adjusted, therefore we have to fit our observations to the holy book. So it's a whole different kind of lying, because I think he's entirely sincere in believing this, but it is invalid reasoning. That there's no a priori reason to expect that this holy book that came out of Arabia, a long time ago, is particularly credible as a source of scientific information. So yeah,
this is something that we sort of touched upon slightly when I met you in Dublin, PZ. If it is the case that people have this psychological disposition to ignore reality or create their own reality, what is the solution to the problem? Because it isn't obviously in. It seems to me that the solution has to lie in something deeper and more psychological.
Okay, you want me to solve the problem right now? The answer, I don't have the answer.
I would like your thoughts. Well, you and the other people on the panel, I'd like your thoughts about it, because I think that it's very easy to attack the factual or the non-factual statements that they make. But as I say, there's an underlying problem, and I think that if people just take the easy shots, they're not addressing what's at the heart of it all.
Yeah, and I really think that the fundamental problem here is that to simplify it a bit and to dichotomize it a little bit more than we should, there's two ways of raising children. And one way is to raise them to question and be critical thinkers and to doubt and to study honestly and try to come up with the truth. And the other is to raise them while telling them that you already have the truth and now your purpose in life is to fulfill this truth. And that second one is the problem. It's a successful way for generating children who slot themselves into society and fit a very specific, very predetermined role, but I think it's fundamentally a kind of child abuse. What we need is some way that we can respect the fact that parents have rights to their children and vice versa, but at the same time, society also has a reasonable expectation of a fair and equitable form of education for everybody, and nobody gets to exclude themselves from it. And part of that education has to be in skepticism and critical thinking.
Yeah, I think that if you start from the position that the thing you're looking at is from an infallible source, and you accept that you are a fallible entity, what you do is you look at this book and you read through it, and you may see something in there that appears to be absolutely miraculous, and you understand it a certain way, and you're going to cling on to that because you trust it. But then when someone comes along and shows you absolutely clearly that what you're claiming is wrong, you don't accept that the book is wrong. You just accept, well, I'm only a human. My understanding of the book must be wrong. What I've got to do is look really, really hard and be more open to what was really being said rather than what I wanted it to say. And then when they finally come up with something that matches reality, that's what it was saying after all. Now I'm closer to God. I know even more than I used to know.
Yeah.
Combination lock by trying every possible combination.
Yeah. So I think what it is, it's the difference between inquiry and rationalization. And we've got a large percentage of the population that thinks the proper way to examine the world is by rationalizing it, by fitting it to an expectation, rather than inquiry, which is an honest investigation of the truth.
I mean, if I may just throw in another complication to this, I think that, PZ, you're right. In an ideal world, parents would bring up their children in a more responsible way. And was it Plato who said that the responsibility of bringing up children is far too onerous to be left to parents, and others should take over? But another problem, of course, is Hamza is one of these people that actually came to religion later in life, much like the other lunatics that we see on YouTube, such as Venom Fang X and Nephilim Free. These are latecomers to religion. So,
hang on a minute. No, before you carry on, don't say Hamza and then say and other lunatics. I don't think it's fair to call Hamza a lunatic. Come on. Withdraw your comment. Strip that from the record.
I withdraw it entirely. It was an awful thing to say. Hamza and lunatics that we see on YouTube, such as Nephilim Priya and Venom Fang X, who have, all of them have come to religion late. And it seems to be that they are more fervent believers than those that actually grew up with it.
Yeah, that's been a common phenomenon I've seen, yeah. Part of it, too, though, is I think it's how they came to religion. That, a lot of people are just sort of brought up in it and they take it for granted. It's part of the background noise of their life. They don't question it, but it's there. Late converts, something traumatic happened. Something had to have happened in their life that changed it. I wrote recently about Philip Johnson, who's the guy who wrote Darwin on Trial and founded the intelligent design movement. And if you look at his biography, you discover that what happened to him is he literally went through a midlife crisis. He went through a traumatic divorce, and he was struggling for meaning in his life. And what does he do? He turns to Jesus. And I think that's a very, very common phenomenon, that people are frustrated, they're unhappy, they're grappling with something they can't handle, and suddenly religion comes along, and it doesn't give them the tools to handle the problem. It gives them the tools to evade the problem, and they can escape responsibility from it. And then they have a very powerful interest in that particular belief.
Interesting, though, again, just very quickly, because it's directly relevant to PZ's point. Some of them do have that sort of crisis, but I'm just going through, I don't know whether you've had the opportunity to read it. It's Michael Sherman's book, The Believing Brain, in which he gives an account of Francis Collins' conversion to religion, and what did it for him appears to have been taking a country walk and coming across a frozen waterfall. He doesn't seem to have been going through that sort of life crisis that you're referring to, although I accept your point. Most of the accounts that I have heard have some sort of crisis involved with them.
Well, but there's a little disingenuousness there. Collins, when you read the book, also describes a lot of other things that were going on in his life. That he was a country doctor for a while, and what he also cites, depending on the interview, he cites different things. But he also talks about the fact that he encountered a lot of poor people who were suffering pain and deprivation, and who were able to cope with religion. The religion helped them handle their lives that were lives he found terribly painful and stressful. So he was building up to that for a long, long time. And honestly, nobody just out of the blue sees a tripartite waterfall and says, "Oh, Jesus." He was prepped for that. That was in his brain long before he went on that little country walk.
I think.
I'm sorry. Can I just? I think there's also a novelty factor. The feeling that people who convert later in life, that a drastic change, like a lot of those, like a midlife crisis or something, a drastic change will bring something new. It'll make your life more interesting, and maybe this is a departure, like running away from home or something like that. And I think that this has held true even for me in in criticizing Islam as well as Christianity, because of course when you start off as any kind of an outspoken skeptic, you're going to criticize what's local more likely than not. And because I was raised around Christianity all the time, I actually really enjoyed looking into Islamic lore because it was new and it was foreign. It wasn't so that when one time for the Magic Sandwich show, I'd been doing all this stuff for, the Quran this and the Hadiths that and the Tariq this and that and so forth. And it was really interesting because, there were times where I stopped, I severed the connection between why I was reading it and what it contained, and I found that it was really quite stimulating reading about the battles and the succession and how many caliphs were assassinated and so forth, and then also the sort of wacky bylaws in the hadiths. I mean, the thing that I quoted earlier, the Sahih al-Bukhari, I know that Kling and DPR have already recommended books. By the time you leave the show, you'll have a big stack of 50 books that everyone on the show has been pushing on you. But really, if you're ever bored, read the Sahih, read the Sahih al-Bukhari. It is the most laugh-out-loud funny book I think I've ever read, and it's considered an almost holy text. But anyway, I had to go back and study some Bible verses for another episode of the Magic Sandwich Show that DPR hosts. And it was really, I just dreaded going back to studying the Bible after I'd been looking at the Quran and Islam, because it was like eating cold cereal at home after you've been eating pizza out at restaurants all the time. It's just, not Christianity again. I'm so tired of this. The Bible again. I've read this thing twice. So I think that, like in the case of, the few Westerners who convert to Islam or other religions from, from the Middle or Far East, I think there's a novelty to it, although that word novelty would be as offensive to them as any other descriptions we hoist on it. But I really think that is a strong factor. The feel that some drastic change or something new or foreign is going to be more exciting and more stimulating, is going to make their life better.
I think that is true. Like when I look at how Buddhism and Confucianism and Taoism are treated here in Australia, it's the same sort of thing. It's a foreign religion. There's something exciting about it. Something exciting about the unknown. I think with Hamza though, this is pure speculation, but I rather suspect that he's afraid of death. And essentially everything that PZ said and everything that you said, it simply just boils down to appeals to emotion. That seems to be the main factor for people converting to religion. And for staying in religion, it just seems to be appeals to emotional reasons.
Well, yeah.
So I don't actually know what. Sorry, you go first, PZ.
Oh, I was just going to say that that's fine. And emotions are real and valid. I think that's a perfectly good reason to adopt, to initially adopt a sort of some sort of idea. And I can see where many converts to religion find it satisfying and interesting, and it helps them think the way they want to think. But that's a whole different question from, is it true? And we skeptics sit around and we're not asking, okay, does this idea make me feel better? No, we're asking, is this idea true? And if it's true, then we want to pursue it. But if it's not, it doesn't matter how good it makes you feel.
To convince them that that was our reasoning process. For example, Hamza, referring to yourself and I think also Professor Dawkins, has called you atheist apologists and says again and again that such and such a behavior is typical of atheist apologists. And that I can recall, I think he's the first person I think who's ever really called anyone an atheist apologist. And I've become accustomed to people on the religious side of the debate sort of mirroring our arguments and hoping that there's effective. It's like, well, you accuse us of being dogmatic, but aren't you just as dogmatic, and so forth and so on. So there's a lot of mimicry of some of the argumentation we use, but I think that's a first. And it just goes to show the degree that they, I think, project their own reasoning process onto us. And what you just said, it's very difficult to convince them that we truly put inquiry first. Many of them, it seems, are convinced that we, like them, chose our position and are now manning the barricades to defend it at all costs.
Well, we did sort of. I mean, that's fair. That but the thing is that we picked an opinion that's defensible. That's the whole big difference here is that we have a set of tools that allow us to test and evaluate our positions. We actually try to honestly assess our own position, and we also honestly question it when parts of it are shaky or wrong. And that's why it turns out our position is so strong, is because we actually do get out there and weed out the stuff that doesn't work and add new stuff that does work and build it stronger and stronger and stronger. And they're stuck with their foundation, their absolute foundation that they will not change.
I think one of the things with people who are more recent converts being so enthusiastic and going out there trying to recruit other people is they've experienced this change in their life, which they obviously think is absolutely brilliant. And they've gone from basically eating rubbish food to eating brilliant food. And it's a little bit like that. If you find somewhere that's really ace to go and eat, you go and tell your friends, oh, there's this great place to go and eat. It only costs 50p and you can have 10 pints of beer or, whatever it is that they've found that's absolutely brilliant. And another part of it as well is this person has completely changed their opinion on what they see to be a very big issue. And, of course, the people around them probably don't hold the same position. And they know that these people are going to be thinking, what did he do that for? So they've got to then think of all these good reasons that they should have done it. And then in going out and telling all these people these other reasons, they're not only justifying it to themselves, if they can convince other people, it will reaffirm in them that they made the right choice in the first place. Mm-hmm. That's all. I'm extrapolating a little bit, but basically that's the position I was in when I was looking, and what I call my dark era, where I was looking at religion and wanted it to be true. And basically it was the Quran that ultimately led me to atheism, quite ironically. And because I wanted to be able to prove to members of my family that I hadn't made a stupid decision, I decided to look at it in very great detail and then realised that if I had become a Muslim, I'd have made a stupid decision. So, right.
So the Quran's good for something. That's good to hear.
Oh, yeah. Well, the scientific miracles claims, what they did is people were saying to me, no, faith alone isn't a good way to determine the truth. Now, this had always been drummed into me from school. Faith is beautiful. But these Muslim people were saying to me, no, faith is no good. We've got evidence. We've got scientific miracles. We've got the Quran itself, which is a miracle. And basically what it did is it hired my expectations. They taught me to expect evidence, and then they didn't give me any evidence.
Stop Spamming, who's here to discuss Islam and reality. Remember, if you'd like to join the panel, send a contact request to the Gin and Tonic Show on Skype, and we will add you as soon as we have an open slot. So far, we don't have any Muslim callers in. If you're a Muslim caller and would like to raise any issue or discuss anything with us, really, you're welcome to come on. We won't just be waiting here with baseball bats to bludgeon you all at once. We'll do our very best to be civil, and if at any point you feel that you're being bullied or mistreated, by all means speak up. We do want to have discourse with people on the other side of the debate. So, stop spamming. Go for it.
Exactly. First of all, I want to say, Professor PZ, you are a star and a gentleman to come on here and grace us with your presence. I think this is really brilliant. Thanks a stack. Really brilliant. Okay, I'm the guy that... Sorry?
It's just a quiet Saturday afternoon, you know. Something
Well, it's not quiet anymore, but I really appreciate it, and I think a lot of other people here do too. I'm the realistic guy. I'm the guy that looks at reality. I'm not the philosophical and ontologically and transcendentally and all that. I look at what happens in the real world. I work with Muslims. I live with Muslims. I have Muslim friends, and they're just normal people. I avoid normally talking about religion, and I liked what DPR was saying. Does Hamza actually believe it? And this goes for a lot of people. They have convinced themselves that something is true. Hamza believes that Muhammad is the guy who actually heard everything, and he is the guy who started the whole movement. This is what he believes. The rest is just garnish, but this is what he believes. But what Muslims don't understand is that when you drag the Quran, the religious text, into the science arena, you automatically subject it to the scientific spotlight and scrutiny. You can't have it in two worlds at the same time. And this is what they don't understand. And then they don't see that it can be a nebulous text when it goes to spirituality. But as soon as it becomes scientific, you have to answer the scientific community. That is a huge problem. Now, his idea is not to translate a word and to retain it, as a concept rather than committing himself to a specific function. And this is where he is making the mistake in his brain, where he's coming to you and saying, well, actually, this is a word and it has 15 different meanings. I'm not going to tell you which one it actually is. It can be all of those 15 because this is the function that I need at that moment. And that is all he's doing. So he's retaining the flexibility. And this is the way that these people work.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. What we're dealing with, though, you mentioned earlier that most Muslims are good people, and I agree entirely. And it's the same with most Christians, that Islam and Christianity and whatever faith you want to have isn't directly the problem. The problem, though, is that when you've got large numbers of people who have adopted a way of thinking that basically unmoors them from reality, that says you do not have to do a test of your ideas against the actual facts and evidence, what you've done is created a huge reservoir of potential nonsense where these people can be easily led into very dangerous positions. I have a fairly optimistic view of humanity, and I think the only reason religion hasn't destroyed us is that most people deep down have a little bit more common sense than that. But still, it's a problem that what we have is, a species-wide sanctioned philosophy that says you don't have to trust in reality, that what you have to trust in is whatever you want to believe in. And like you say, most of these people are nice. They're good people. But that sure is a really dangerous idea to hold.
Absolutely. I think it's this concept of what you call it, the piper or whatever this guy was called, where he plays a tune and everybody follows. And the thing is, they are susceptible to this kind of thing. They are easily impressed. If somebody, how many times did Hamza ask you, are you professor, right? Professor, right? Professor. They are so impressed by this thing. So, yeah, it's quite funny. But he is this kind of a person. That's why he likes a formalized debate. so that, as DPR put it, he can light his 15 fires in 5 minutes, which you need to put out in I don't know, it would take you 5 hours to do that, because most of those are linguistic, semantic claims, and which require text research, and you can't do that in that time. This is why he just drowns you in these things. And then he says, you did not address the inimitable Quran or the...
That's not good enough.
Yeah.
When I get together with scientists will argue just as much as we will with religious people, okay? But the thing is that the things we argue about are things that what we have is a vested interest in trying to resolve the argument. And we want to resolve the argument towards whichever answer is the most correct one.
Right.
And in an argument with somebody advancing the Quran or the Bible or whatever, they do not have that honest interest in how they're going to approach the problem. So, for instance, many years ago, some colleagues and I got in a debate with some other colleagues about a very esoteric point. It was about whether certain cells delaminated or they rolled in as a sheet. Whether they were coherent or whether they fell apart. And we argued about this, and we all had our own views. And what we all said to each other was, okay, we're going home, we're going to the lab, we're going to go test it. We'll do the experiment, and we'll report back. And whatever the answer is that we come up with, we will accept. Even the ones of us who had a vested interest in the wrong answer, like me, we were still willing to accept whatever reality told us. And unfortunately, in these debates with people like Sortzis, they do not share that interest. That's what makes the debates extremely unsatisfying, is because the only way they will accept resolution is by us wholeheartedly accepting their position.
Right. This is one of my mottos or credos, where I say, if you tell a scientist he is wrong, you will say thank you. If you tell it to a theist, he will say F you. Sorry.
Yes, we might not say thank you. I'd say, okay, you better show me that.
The other point that the caller raised initially was the surprise that religious people have that their religious claims, after they've explicitly said that they are also scientific claims, should be subjected to a set of rules laid down by the scientific community and tradition. They have the nerve to act surprised. And I liken it to someone entering the Roman Colosseum, and when the lions are eating them, they say, I thought this was a quiz show. Or when the gladiator starts to throw a net over them and stab them with a spear, they say, I thought this was a beauty pageant. It's just, they really need to know what they're getting into. And I think that the one wise move that Hamza and company have made is, for example, when he came on the MSS and he said, I realize now that the Quran is not a science textbook, which he really merits a retroactive standing ovation for that one.
Yeah, that's progress. That's good.
Well,
Jones, off the panel and bring another guest in. Thanks for joining us.
That I have been talking to are quite funny, because they take your video and then they repeat you saying simultaneously 20 times and think that you going simultaneously so often is making a point. And then they quote mine this and take it out of context and then show it as something else. And it's so amazing what happens on these forums in reality, in everyday life, how these people are applauding Hamza and how they see him as the new leader into the new information age, because he uses fancy words and he is really showing those atheists. So, but they're afraid because they can handle Christians, because they have 15, cut and dried arguments, but they don't really know how to handle atheists. Okay,
I think an excellent example of what you just said was there was a video on YouTube which was of the original confrontation where IERA ambushed you on the way out of the atheist convention. And, of course, after that, there was lots of YouTube videos saying, PZ Myers proves the Quran is wrong. But then there was this one video which says, World famous embryologist PZ Myers confirms the accuracy of the Quran. And they took the end of you saying, oh no, these are happening simultaneously. And then they're saying, look, the Quran says it happens simultaneously. And they ignore the fact that at the beginning of the sentence you said, in that case you have just proven the Quran is wrong.
Exactly.
Cut that off and said, he says that it's right.
Well, that part of it was inconvenient, so of course you had to cut it out. Yeah.
And it's funny because they give you things where they say, well, he never said that. And then I link him to the video. I tell him, well, go to 3 minutes, 15 seconds, and you will hear him say this. Aha. And then I say, okay, you just called me a liar. Will you apologize? No answer. I said, well, me with my atheistic moral values, I would apologize. They don't feel shame. For them, they just made a statement. They don't care. For them, oh, we just made a mistake. Oh, okay, it doesn't matter. Where I would feel bad that I really misrepresented his view or something, and I say, "Ooh, geez, I really made a mistake. I'm very sorry." They don't care.
Oh,
Okay,
you're just not
much.
used to that business of adjusting reality to fit your opinions.
Exactly. Yeah.
You have to master that skill to be a good religious person.
And they have that down to a T. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much for being here. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
You're taking off. Thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
Yes,
Bye.
We talked earlier about people, religious people like Hamza, and their idea of authority and how much the concept of authority is attractive to them. But I think that if you look at what especially Adnan Rashid was saying, for example, he made a statement that there was no flood in the Quran, and then later on they had to deal with that because, of course, there is a flood in the Quran. As a matter of fact, there's a whole surah named after Noah. And then there's other mentions of it throughout Islamic lore. So they said, well, it's not a global flood.
I just want to nitpick what he said was Aaron said a global flood. Oh no, a great flood, and Adnan said there is no great flood in the Quran. So I just want to be absolutely spot on when we say what people said. He didn't say there was no flood. He said there's no great flood, and then he said, oh yeah, it was a local flood.
I could have sworn he says I can almost hear it in my mind's eye. My mind's ear, not my mind's eye. I can almost hear him saying, well, there is no flood in the Quran.
But the thing is the context was he was replying to the statement by Aaron, the great flood, and he said, no, there was no flood. You can give him the benefit of the doubt that he was saying, there wasn't the flood you just said.
He must have known that it was, I mean, even if you're, no matter where you're coming from, if you have exposure to the Abrahamic tradition, you know that the Judeo-Christian scriptures have a flood. So I don't think there was any room for confusion about which flood. He tried to. So I think he knew exactly what he was talking about. He said there is no flood. He meant there was not that particular flood. But later on, they of course had to backtrack and say that yes, this event happened. It's just not as it's described. It wasn't a global flood, and so forth. And then of course there was where he changed his stance from one moment to the next about whether it was a sequence of events of the embryo versus a simultaneous development. And I think that the reason I bring that up is I think that not just the concept of authority, but the concept of infallibility is very attractive to religious people. And they just want to tap into that. They just want to put a tap in the keg of that infallibility because you see a tremendous tendency amongst religious people, both professional spokesmen like Adnan and Hamza, and of course the people we spar with on YouTube, they seem very reticent to admit mistakes on even relatively minor points. It's always embarrassing to make a mistake, especially in public, especially live. But it happens, and if you're a bit humble about it, I don't think it would completely disassemble your argument. I mean, Adnan can be wrong about one thing, and it doesn't necessarily, destroy. I mean, it might undermine to a degree, our estimation of his knowledge. But he could have said, "Oops, there is a flood. Guess I messed up," and I don't think it would have destroyed. I mean, even if they had to throw him under the bus, it wouldn't have undermined every possible argument that could be made in favor of the religion. So it's just there's this very stubborn capacity to deny even the slightest mistake, not just on the behalf of the Creator, being that they worship who's allegedly perfect and never makes mistakes, but on the part of the individual. They all had to cover his ass.
Yeah. Of course, the other problem is that if he's denying his knowledgeability about the subject that's central to his entire argument, that's a rather dramatic undercutting that's going on right there. It'd be like me coming on admitting, I know nothing at all about biology. Oops. Then why the heck are you listening to me at all?
Describing human embryonic development, and you misspoke and got two things mixed with one another or used the wrong term. It would be a relatively simple matter for you to say, that's not what I meant to say. It would be very easy to backtrack if you were honest about making the mistake. The Japanese have a saying, it goes, even monkeys fall from trees. That is, even monkeys that swing from trees all the time sometimes fall, even though you'd think they'd be experts at it.
An important thing is, because we haven't actually discussed this on air yet, that since bringing out the new booklet, and you looked at this new booklet, Hamza has claimed that you've changed your position that the Quran is wrong, which we kind of discussed earlier, but that you were wrong, that bones and flesh develop simultaneously. So, is your position still that the claim that bones come before flesh is erroneous because they don't?
Yes, it is. I mean, it definitely is. Even in Sortz's defense that he made on YouTube, he required some equivocation. What he said was that he had a biology text that said the cartilaginous framework of the bone developed, and then myotubes differentiated. If we're going to be nitpicking words, cartilage isn't bone. There's no bone there. You don't get bone until quite late in development, and that's long after muscles have appeared. So we could argue either way.
That's what proves how flexible the semantics are, because if I'm put in the position of arguing his position, I could say, well, it's not talking about bone as in a certain composition of a certain ratio of calcium versus other. It's talking about the structure, which is clearly laid down in a cartilage form initially. So there's still more than enough wiggle room for them to say that, well, if you look at it, the Arabic versus the English versus the technical terms, there's still enough room to say that this is, strictly speaking, not necessarily incorrect.
Right, and at root, I think the problem is simply an attempt at oversimplification. He's only got two verses. They're kind of vague verses at that, and yet this process of determination and differentiation of the tissues of a limb is a complex, elaborate phenomenon that takes a long time to execute and takes almost as long to describe our knowledge about it. So you simply can't equate the two. They just don't go together.
Point you wanted to raise, and then I'll remove you and bring in someone else.
Sorry, yes, thank you very much. I'm taking it somewhat back, but Stopspamming, who I always think talks absolutely wonderful sense, and appreciate his videos. If you haven't seen them, you should do. He raised the point that one of the last points he raised was or pointed out was that you never get an apology from these people, whether it's Christians or Hamza or whoever. They make these bold statements. But take it even further back, go back to a point that Klingschor made, that he said that he thinks that Hamza has a fear of death, and that may be what turned him to religion. I think that I'd put it more generally. Reminded, whenever I think of this, of Richard Feynman's classic words, I can live with doubt and uncertainty. In fact, I prefer not knowing than having ideas that may be wrong. That doesn't frighten me. I may have got a few words wrong, but that was the gist of it. And I do think that at the heart of a lot of religious people's beliefs is that uncertainty does frighten them. On that note, can I thank you very much for taking my call, and thank you for putting on the show. It's really good fun. Take care, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. Bye. PZ, in the UK recently, I don't know how accurate the accounts are, but there's been some talk that Muslim students have been walking out of the University of London. They've been walking out of biology classes at any point that evolution's being taught. Now, I've also heard the argument that evolution isn't actually that much of a fundamental part of a biology course. Now, being as I didn't even take biology as a school option after the age of 13, I wouldn't have a clue. So, is evolution. I mean, at a later stage, no. At first, leaving main school, going to college, first set of further education, is evolution an important part of biology?
Whoa! Now, yeah, this is getting a little tricky here, because I would say that many people take a strictly phenomenological and applied perspective to biology. That there are many people who are doctors, for instance, who don't need to know the basic underpinnings of how things work. They need to know what treatments work. How can they fix the problem? And for people who think like that, yeah, you can get by without learning a single word of evolution. That's probably going to quote mine someday, but that's a very common thing. But the thing is, if you want to actually understand biology in a deeper sense, and if you want to take that understanding and increase our knowledge about how the body works, of how the natural world works, then evolution becomes essential. When you say, I don't need to know evolution, what you're basically saying is, I'm writing myself out of the discussion. I'm not going to ever contribute to the advance of knowledge in this field. So that's basically what these students are doing, is they're saying, I don't care about improving medicine. I don't care about improving understanding of biology. I just want to get told how to be a by the book rote doctor. And that's not good.
I was listening to a BBC radio broadcast recently on the subject, and Adnan from IERA called in. In fact, I think he was a guest caller. He said that these people should go and attend the evolutionary biology classes. I was glad to hear him say that. But what he did object to, he then disappointed me very soon afterwards when he said, but if they're teaching it that evolution is actually true, then they should walk out.
What? So it's okay if they're teaching things that they say are not true? I don't get that at all.
You see, that's what I didn't get. Is I was under the impression that when you go to college, to the best of their ability, the teacher tries to teach you stuff that is believed to be true. So,
correct.
I can't understand the concept of them standing there and say, okay, class, we're about to indulge in a bit of learning stuff that's probably not true now. But he also objected that he didn't think it was very fair that if a student in the class is to propose an alternative theory, such as intelligent design, that the scientists shoot them down.
Oh no!
The whole process, do they? You don't sit in calculus class and expect the teacher to be drawing this very complicated formula and then looking over his shoulder and saying, "Keep in mind this could all be bollocks." Anyway, as I was saying, and he continues to write. Klingschor before the show started was talking with PZ about how in Turkey they are teaching creationism pretty actively and very widespread in the public schools, and I wonder, Turkey. It seems like a relatively progressive place for the region that it's usually grouped in. I wonder, do the universities, much like American universities have to undo the damage, or put in the role of undoing all the damage that these public schools are doing, and immediately saying, look, we know what you were taught in public school, here's the real deal, and have to sort of do some sweeping and cleaning of the students' minds if they've been indoctrinated at the public schools. Because otherwise you'd be turning out people with utterly backwards views. And it just seems, so many people, like we were talking just a moment ago, they don't seem to understand. They'll say, well, what does evolution have to do with biology as a whole? What does evolution have to do with medicine? And it's really a cringeworthy statement to have to hear from someone, because they don't understand how much predictive potential an understanding of human evolution has on how the various diseases and sicknesses that affect us are going to change, and how we'll have to change, and how, because we've essentially increased our medical capacity to the point that we're healing things that normally would take people out of the population, it means they're no longer going to be selected out. So we're going to have to just continue to increase our understanding in this field, because it's not like these diseases are inflicting enough casualties on the population that we're going to sort of grow immune to them the good old-fashioned way, and that is a plague sweeps through Europe, and then we get an immunity to it, and then we go infect the natives somewhere else. It's so undervalued, the role that it plays in medical science.
I was just wondering, PZ, would you be so kind as to indulge me in a few questions on the subject of evolution?
Sure.
The first question is, why do you hate Muslims, man?
I don't think I hate Muslims. I like people, so no, I just despise Islam.
Okay. Now, we were talking about Turkey just now, which is where the creationist Harun Yahya came from. Harun Yahya did a world tour, not him personally, but his employees, and it was called, what was it, The Collapse of Evolution and the Fact of Creationism. Now, I attended one of these at a university in the UK, and I must say that although before I was quite convinced about evolution, it has given me some doubts. I was wondering, could you look at my screen? Do you see an image instead of my face now? And if so,
yes.
Can you identify this transitional fossil?
Well, what I see is a modern, highly derived echinoderm morphing into a modern, highly derived teleost. And that's not how it works.
Have you ever found, if you look at the third image, have you ever found such a transitional fossil?
No, because such a fossil...
No, thank you. That's your complete answer. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Could you look at this next image? Could you name this transitional fossil?
Oh, that's the infamous crocoduck.
I think you'll find it's a crocoduckling. So I'm starting to question your credibility here. Either you're not credible or you're being intellectually dishonest. Now, could you, by any chance, name? Have you any idea what this transitional fossil is?
It looks like a combination of a snake and a bird.
Correct. And has such a fossil ever been found?
No, it has not.
No. Okay. Well, evolution's not looking too strong to me at the moment, I'm afraid. Now, have you ever found such a fossil as this?
And this is what?
It looks like it's the form of a lizard head on a dolphin jumping out of the sea or something.
No, we have not.
No, okay. And this one...
Sorry, if there was a competition between all these animals, I'm pretty sure the humming snake would get my vote.
And this is the final transitional fossil. I think this is called something like a squiriguana or an igorous squirrel. I'm only guessing. I'm not very good at biology myself, and have you ever seen such a thing?
No, and if we did, it would disprove evolution.
Okay, now the question is, how many of these creatures appeared in slides in Harun Yahya's talk? The answer is all of them on a single slide. And this was genuine material that he was using in his talk, along with the conclusion that the man-made religion of evolution leads necessarily to fascism, as is observed all around the world, and particularly Nazism, I suspect, because Hitler's on there twice, which makes it very Nazi-like.
Yes, it does. It's a very Nazi-ish slide, yeah.
The evidence is pretty conclusive. Hitler is on the slide twice. Well, I must say...
That seals the fate of this story, yeah, it's true.
And the fact that evolution can't even describe how the universe started or how the first cell came about, I'm pretty much sold on creationism now, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Oh well.
And if I can continue the grilling session, I just want to see how much of a scientist you really are, Mr. Myers. I'm just going to do
Nobody told me there was going to be a test.
Well, here's another test to see if you're truly a scientist. Okay?
Hello.
Here's a real question. What determines a child's countenance? How is the features of a child, the sex of a child, determined?
Oh, the sex of a child is...
And its resemblance to its parents. How does this come about?
Well, a combination of environmental and genetic factors.
Wrong! It is due, according to the Prophet himself, it is due to which parent orgasms first during conception. That determines if the child resembles the mother or the father. So I'm beginning to question now if you're a real biologist.
I'm sorry.
Okay?
Wouldn't 99% of the human population be male?
Don't question God. The next question here, I'm beginning to doubt the veracity of your biological credentials here. How many intestines do non-Muslims have?
How many intestines?
That was not meant literally, okay? The part about 7 intestines, come on. You're just...
God, you're being too silly.
He's referring to a story wherein a non-believing guest ate at the house of one of Muhammad's companions, and he ate so much that they exclaimed, the believer eats with 1 intestine and the non-believer eats with 7 intestines. But 7 is, from in the Abrahamic tradition, just a number used as, there were hundreds. Must have been 100 people there. They would say, well, there was 7 times 7 people there. So that in their defense is almost certainly not meant literally.
Okay, never mind. Next one.
No. Come on. We have a real guest. Enough of your shenanigans.
Yeah, come on now.
Right.
Stop the students.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
Jam Shady, thank you for coming back. We had a great discussion last time you were on. Welcome back to the show. What would you like to discuss with us today?
No problem. Thank you very much for having me back. I've just gotten in. I've only listened to the last 5 minutes, so forgive me if I've missed any really cool, fun stuff for the first. You guys have been on for about an hour. But, can I just say, though, that this whole thing of the child resemblance thing and Muslims not getting apologies, you guys really, really only just take one view, whichever suits your point, because the things are not meant like that. And I believe actually in Hamza's recent video, he did apologize. But anyway, let's move on. That's not why I'm here. The reason why I'm here, obviously, is because we have our guest, Mr. PZ Myers. Hello, how are you doing? Okay. You might not remember, we actually met in Norway, although Hamza was actually doing most of the talking, and we made an offer to you, actually, to have a debate, which I believe that you've actually declined on several occasions.
Yes.
I am here, actually, to make this exact same offer to you again. We do have, obviously, this research piece that Hamza has done. It's an area of science that you are, or you claim to be, I'm not saying whether you are or not, because I have no knowledge as in-depth as others do. An expert on it, but from IERA's perspective, we would really, really love to have a proper debate with you, if you are willing. I know there has been some objections with regards to the format which Ed has raised. Seems to he believes that it's used by theists because it presents some kind of an advantage or anything like that. But we are willing to, we can talk about the format or anything like that. If you want to make it a more conversational style, if you want to change the format, that's fine, not a problem. We can discuss further options. But what we would like to do is to make an offer to you to have a debate on the Big Debates platform with Hamza, and essentially we'll also be covering all the expenses as well. So from your perspective, all you need to do is just turn up.
I have a policy that I formulated a while back after a few too many of these crazy debates that I do not debate creationists. So, no, on principle, I simply cannot do it. I'm happy to discuss these issues, but debates are a waste of time.
Okay, so when you say discuss, do you mean from the position that we present our position, you present your position, it's up to the audience to choose, rather than a debate which can also turn into a little bit of an argument kind of thing? It's a little bit more formal. Is that because I'm trying to reconcile your statement there with you being perfectly happy with Hamza coming on the show now and having a conversation with you about it, because it seems a little bit contradictory.
No, because the thing is that what a debate is it's formalized rhetoric. Debates are not intended to get to the truth of a matter. Okay. What you do with what you're doing with a debate is you're standing up there and posturing, and whoever can pose the most effectively wins the debate. And then, of course, they go off and they say, "Well, I have just proven the truth of my position," and that's simply not the case. what I will do with people is I will say, okay, I've had many calls to do these debates. What I'll say instead is, okay, you've got this person who wants to debate me. Instead, why don't you have that person give a public lecture in which he gives his case or her case, and I'm willing to give a similar public lecture in the same venue, same place, near the same time, and we will then have an informal discussion about it. But I will not get into these word games that debates promote.
Okay, can I just answer those two things? You mentioned there that the person then can then go off and claim they've won the debate. I think that should actually be left up to the audience to determine, has a particular person presented a sufficiently strong argument. Of course, you've mentioned there's a lot of rhetoric. That's exactly what people do when they offer a position. You have to be able to explain why it is that you believe what you do. So I actually disagree with you on the whole. This is actually when a debate
format fails, because like I said, I've been in many debates before, and what will happen is that my opponent will sort of spew out a whole series of random objections, and then expect me to answer them all. And you simply can't do that. It doesn't work. You cannot present the scientific background for a specific question in the time-limited format of a debate.
Okay. Fine. Let me answer that point. I want to answer another point that actually I was just going to come, because you mentioned that you wouldn't mind a format where one person does some kind of a public lecture. Hamza has actually, I'm not sure if you're aware or not, has actually done a public lecture on this embryology research about 3 weeks ago now, I think. So that actually already exists. The problem with that format is it splits the audience, because obviously we would probably expect a more Muslim-heavy attendance at something that Hamza was speaking at, and we probably expect a more non-Muslim-heavy attendance at any format that you're speaking at. By doing the debate together, or by doing some kind of a presentation together, you'd have the exact same audience there receiving both sides of essentially the same argument. So that's why I kind of disagree with having two... Sorry?
I'm sorry, I'm being silly. I was saying, you think it might be a fight in the stands? Is that what you're aiming for?
No.
Are we going World Wrestling Federation with this?
No, I'm saying that you wouldn't receive the attendance of the same people. You would find some people would...
My failed attempt at humor aside, I completely agree with you about the dividing the audience issue. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's my concern there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I
forgot the point you just last raised.
Well, but I was going to say that's still a problem, because I've done this many times, and trust me, when I go to do these debates, what I discover is that typically the other side has this resource called a church, and they organize church groups, and the audience is packed with religious people. So, it's your argument has no bearing on how I feel about it, because I'm used to sitting there and having to deal with an audience that's predominantly prejudiced against me right from the beginning.
That's not really
I've got an idea for an alternative, which is that
Ed, sorry, can I just suggest 2 points, because I'm going to forget them otherwise. Okay,
well, write them down then. Another alternative, of course, is that rather than having a formal structure to a debate, two people could have a discussion where each point that is raised can be discussed in detail if it's not agreed upon in real time, with no audience there to be shouting boo or yeah or anything like that. And that is exactly the kind of scenario that would have occurred if Hamza had come today, was invited numerous times. IERA were asked if they wanted to attend numerous times. And I even said that I would ask PZ first, of course, if Hamza wanted to accept. I was going to ask PZ, would he mind if during the duration of the call with Hamza, if the rest of the panel left the call so that we weren't intervening in any way? And then, of course, Hamza could have had the one-on-one discussion with PZ Myers that he apparently quite desperately wants. Now, yes, you can make your points now, sorry.
Right. Okay, so there's a lot of points to now answer because I've got the two of you, and this is exactly what I was mentioning to you on Facebook, is an issue with having a chat on Skype, and you've kind of just proven my point. To answer your points first, because can I speak now?
No, because you've just made a statement that is untrue. This
well,
is not.
So did you, but I didn't.
Please don't talk. Please don't. Now, I just said that we would all leave the call. So the point that the objection you're making is completely invalid. I said none of the other panel would be on the call. So please don't say that that would have been a problem with the format.
His initial concern is valid, and this is a problem. I think people complained about this when we had Hamza on the magic sandwich, but I mean, you said it apparently that you would address it, but he was just calling back to why he was concerned about that in the first place. So I think that's fair. Okay. Anyway, Jam, we'll finally let you get back.
Right. Okay. I mean, the whole issue of just having to write the points up. I actually agree with a whole discussion type format. If another format could be discussed where you stick to one topic at a time. The thing is, this debate is only on one subject. The 3 verses in the Quran. And Hamza's point is specifically, does it negate reality? He's not making the point of, there's scientific knowledge from the future in the Quran or anything like that. Just, does this conform to what we know is real? So we can confine the debate literally just to that standard. And I think that should be really easy to do. Just to answer Ed's point, as IERA were invited to attend, I'm not sure why he doesn't think that I'm here on behalf of IERA, given that I've given numerous clues. I really remember now all the other points. This is actually where I agree with more of a discussion style format, that you need to make, that there should be just one point discussed at any one point in time. I know there's, with regards to embryology, there's several stages that have been discussed, and we could discuss one stage in turn. So we could discuss, the issue of the bones and the muscles forming. This is what the Quran says. This is why we believe that. This is why it conforms to reality. And then PZ Myers can then say, well, actually, no, this is what reality is, and whatever have you. What do you think about that? This is up for discussion, basically. But what we want to do is to make a serious offer to you to actually have this debate. And from our position, you seem to just be saying no arbitrarily, but you would agree to have a debate here and now, which is something that we've demonstrated twice in the past can't happen.
Jam, Shady, people go to debates to watch people get honed. They don't. Debate is not somewhere where you really flesh out proper ideas and have a critical analysis. It's where you go to.
Change that.
Well, that is what PZ suggested. The format that PZ suggested is one where you could actually have a proper discussion. Do you understand?
The 3 of us are butting in a bit excessively. Let PZ come back because Jam has come here primarily to have a discussion with him.
The thing is, I get many invitations to go talk about scientific topics. I'll be talking about Evo Devo in February and things like this. And the thing is that I can do those things because we have something of substance to say, that I could get up there and I can talk for an hour easily on these fairly rich topics in developmental biology. What Hamza has to offer us is 2 poetic verses from the Quran. There's nothing to talk about. It's like it's an incredibly mushy bit of phrasing that you can't seriously argue that this is a scientific position that's being advanced. And so there's not much I could say about it except, okay, there's this nice little bit of poetry over here. It doesn't align very well with developmental biology as we know it, but it wasn't intended to do that. It's not a science textbook. So what is the argument?
Well,
what do we do with this?
Okay. As you very well know, when Hamza and Adnan spoke to you in Ireland, there was this whole fiasco over the Quran actually saying that the muscles formed afterwards because Adnan had misunderstood the text. Can I also just make it categorically clear that the Quran stands independent from what anyone says it says? The Quran text has actually been preserved. So regardless of what someone says, you can't argue the Quran is changing just to fit. The Quran says what it says. If someone misunderstands it, that's different. And I believe Hamza and Adnan have apologized for that. But my point being, had the Quran actually said bones formed first, muscles form afterwards, which from your perspective would have been easy for someone who didn't know what he was talking about to say, there would be a clear break from reality there. But as it happens, the Quran uses a wording where it doesn't say that. So that's the point of the argument. The point of the Hamza's position is the Quran, in what it says, hasn't negated reality. Furthermore, there's no other source of information that he could have got this from. And I think you have some opposing views to that, and that essentially would be the source of the debate. Can I also answer, one of you raised a point earlier as well with terms of, I think it was yourself, that Muslim heavy go to these kinds of talks. Believe me, for this embryology in the Quran thing, I actually did a lot of marketing. We got in touch with university academic professors, doctors, GPs. We wanted everyone from the medical community there. They just didn't come out. I don't know why. Maybe it was because they knew, obviously, there was an Islamic influence or not. But it's certainly not through intention that it's Muslim-heavy audiences. It just seems to be that they're more eager to discuss the other side of the topic, whereas non-Muslims are really pretty much firmly rooted in their own opinion, and they don't even want to come to a discussion about it, generally.
Yeah, well, you're doing a good job of making this even less interesting to me, because now what you're saying is that this is an argument over the interpretation of the temporal sequence implied by a single word in an Arabic work of poetry. Why do you want me to talk about this? Because I have no qualifications to judge the Arabic phrasing. I have no interest in, picking hits over this one word.
We're not asking you to do that. We can interpret it, and we're saying this is the interpretation. And I think you actually have a problem with what the interpretation actually says, rather than is the interpretation valid. Yes.
Do you mind if I butt in for a moment? See, here's the thing. I would be very suspicious myself if you said that you guys are going to supply the interpretation, because here's the thing. It seems that the primary point of disagreement over these verses on embryology is between two different schools of Muslim thought. That is, those that think that they are miraculous and those that think that they are not necessarily miraculous. That seems to be the primary point of contention. If you belong to the school that say they're not necessarily miraculous, they're accurate but not direct evidence or proof of the supernatural, then we're not concerned with your school of thought. But the only reason that we became embroiled in this to begin with is that there was this school of thought that said this could only have possibly been known through some supernatural channel. It's like the verse that says, do you not see the sky that all is created held up without pillars? We're not debating that there's a sky. We're debating the issue of if for the sake of argument, there was a school of thought that said there's pillars that hold up the sky, we would take issue with them. And then we would have no interest in arguing with another group that says, no, the interpretation is that there are no pillars. You understand? We agree that there aren't pillars. So what would be the point of a debate between two people who agree?
I'm not sure that I actually see the relevance of the whole pillar thing with this. There's different interpretations. To me, both positions actually seem to be the same. It depends on whether you want to take something literally or not. We're not saying that, well, actually, yes, we are. We're saying that although what the Quran says doesn't negate reality, it is beyond what was known at the time and actually counter to what was known during the 7th century. The implication of that is that it is divine revelation from there.
Okay, so I have to make 2 points here. One is that in one sense, I would say the Quran is fundamentally wrong, because what it is trying to do, what you're trying to argue is with these fine shadings of the timing of the words, is that this very short verse is
cut out that for a second.
You're trying to argue this very short verse is an adequate description that conforms to reality. It does not, because reality is much more complex, that the development of the system is progressive over the course of months, and that it's not black and white. It is not discrete like bones and flesh. That's a misrepresentation of the events that are going on inside the embryo. So that's one level where I'd say it's just completely a wrong-headed argument, and there's no point in debating over it.
I would have thought, seeing as that represents two different points of view. I'm sorry, I'm really not an embryologist and I haven't really studied this, so I apologize. I am fairly ignorant in the subject matter itself. But
Okay,
I would have thought that I would have thought that if this was a fair point of difference, that would be something worth debating over.
Again, I know I'm butting in, but this is the whole problem. PZ is not an expert on the Quran. You and Hamza and company are not experts on embryology. So it's like both sides are equally unqualified to discuss embryology in the Quran. Although Professor Myers, I would just take them up on arguing any old thing. And that's just me. I think you should do it. I think you just don't even ask what it's for. Just show up, and I think that you will do reasonably well. I think you should do it just to, give a crying baby its song, for lack of a better word.
Here.
Can I clarify this?
And we can pick up the expenses and everything like that. So literally, all you have to do is just turn up exactly the same thing as tonight. I'm not seeing a real credible difference here.
So you don't understand embryology, but you feel qualified to make these claims about embryology in the Quran. Is that correct?
Myself? No. I'm not making any claims. I'm just briefly giving what Hamza's position actually is. I'm not arguing it in detail, so I'm not engaging PZ in a debate actually what the Quran says right now, because I don't know. I mean,
so
I've read
is Hamza an expert on embryology?
I think he's researched it to a sufficient level that he can defend and justify the position that he's raised in his work.
Okay, so you think that he is completely justified in making these claims about embryology in relation to the Quran?
I think he thinks he is, and this is where the focus of the debate will be. I'm not saying he is or he isn't. I don't know. I'm a layperson in the middle. I'm willing to listen to both sides of the view. And that's why I'm trying to get PZ Myers and Hamza together to have a debate, and I have the authority to do that. So if Mr. Myers would agree to have a debate with Hamza, if he wants to have it in the US, no problem. If he wants to have it in the UK, no problem. We'll pick up the tabs. We'll make all the arrangements. As I said, you literally just have to turn up. The other thing, sorry, I just briefly remembered that you mentioned that the other side would raise a lot of points that you would be expected to answer. You don't have to answer anything if you don't want to, if you don't find it credible or valid. Again, the format is completely up to you, or we can even change the format. Look, we discuss one point at a time. We don't move on. The format itself is completely open for discussion. What we want to do is actually just bring the two of you together, and we can discuss how best to do that. If, in principle, you're happy to do that.
This is just so bizarrely flattering that, I'm sitting here wondering what's going on here, because you were trying so hard to get me to go share a stage with Hamza Sortzis. And I'm sitting here and, I'm thinking, if the shoe were on the other foot, would I be at all interested in trying to get Hamza Sortzis to come to me to debate me on some issue? And
well, you might want to see how much effort Ed has. You might want to see how much effort Ed has actually been putting in on Facebook and on Twitter and everything, trying to get Hamza here. Ed has been putting in a lot of effort to try and get Hamza here. And we already said, I actually said to Ed right before the whole thing started, that Hamza was actually busy today already.
No, you said he might be.
Actually,
no, you didn't know. You said, I think he might be.
No.
I can pull up no, let's not argue semantics.
Hang on.
Let's just put it this way.
The point
let's
is,
not argue semantics.
Do you disagree that you've made
we want to hear from you, Jim.
extensive effort? Do you disagree that you've made extensive efforts to try and get Hamza here? To try and get Hamza on the show?
No, of course I don't. Of course I don't deny it.
So, responding to PZ's point, I think there is good interest on both sides to make a discussion between you two happen. I think that's clear. We already said right from the very beginning that in the Skype channel, that can't happen because of two not very good previous experiences where a point can't be delivered across. We do want to have a formal structure because I think that's fair to both sides. Essentially, that's it. You're sitting here already. You seem to have hinted that you wanted to have a discussion with Hamza. You guys are making videos and responses online, back and forward. Let's stop all of that, get you both on the same stage, on the same platform, and have a dialogue with each other.
Can I?
Wait, no. Oh, wait, there's a hiccup in his connection. Anyway, I'm going to put a stop to this, Jim. Would you, if you have another point to raise, you can, or you can stay on the panel as we discuss other things, or you can leave. It's your choice. But the offer's been extended. It's now up to
Sure.
The IERA and PZ to work out any details of any discussion that may or may not happen. So I don't want the whole show to be consumed with this. I hope you don't mind.
Nope, that's fine. I think I've made our position clear, so that's fine. Great. I don't mind staying on if you guys have any issues, because the other thing actually I did want to raise, I do think that you guys raise a lot of points, but you don't understand the Islamic context behind it. So you're looking at things completely from a different and an incorrect position, and then you're trying to break that position apart. So I don't mind being online just to at least explain, no, actually, this is why we think that, and this is what that actually means, if you're happy to do that, or it's up to you guys. This is your platform.
Wait, no, I've read...
I'm happy to keep you on as real-time counterpoint. That's fine. As a matter of fact, it's something we need, I think. PC, you look like you had to say something?
Well, this is kind of a weird argument to make, because I think Sorts has made a strong effort to lay out his position in his paper on embryology, and I have read that paper. And in previous parts of this discussion, we have discussed that paper and addressed the points in it. I have written a fairly lengthy blog post on that paper. So I have addressed the embryology that Sorts has presented. And I'm not quite sure what more you want from me, because I wrote a critique of that thing.
We want the exact same thing as what Ed has asked for, which is a debate between you two guys, because Hamza believes that you have misunderstood the position or misrepresented it. You believe he's misrepresenting, so fine. Rather than writing massive blog posts and making videos against each other, just come on the same platform and things can be, in one...
How does this improve the conversation?
I'm going to put a fork in this. This is done for now. Any details are left to be sorted out. I don't want the whole show to be taken over this. So I'm going to get the ball rolling on something completely different. Hassan, we haven't given Hassan a chance to speak this entire time. Probably the most knowledgeable person on the panel, and he's been like a wallflower. So here's what I have for Hassan, of course, you are familiar with the passages that are under contention between this, I guess you could now call it a three-way split, between those claiming it's necessarily a miracle, may or may not be a miracle or not a miracle among Muslims, and then, of course, we, who, of course, don't think it's a miracle at all. What is as a fluent Arabic speaker, what's a breakdown of what does it say, what does it actually say in its original Arabic, and what do these terms typically mean as best you understand them?
First of all, let me say that when I was a Muslim, these scientific miracles never impressed me. I believed in Islam for other reasons. I believe that it was a matter of faith. And I think this idea of science proving Islam is a fairly new thing. If you look at a lot of the scientists, the Muslim scientists in the Middle Ages, there was the sphere of science and learning. I think there was a guy called Ibn Rushd who said that, there was a science and there was faith, and these things shouldn't interact with each other, and they shouldn't mix. And that was always my position. I was never impressed by these miracles, claims of miracles, when I was a Muslim, and they were not the reason I was a Muslim. I was obviously born a Muslim. When I started practicing around the age of 19, it was a very emotional period, a spiritual period, when I was searching for God. I recently heard Hamza give a video actually saying that, the big questions of where I come from, where am I going, what's going to happen after death, all these kind of spiritual questions were the ones that actually moved me. I was searching for a meaning to my life. I was, looking for God and so on. And of course, because I was born a Muslim, that was the nearest thing that I reached for. There were lots of incidents in my life which kind of confirmed that Islam was true. I had some spiritual experiences, and I read the Quran. I felt very moved. I think like a lot of believers, like everyone, we're all a bit selective about what we see. We're a bit selective about our information, and we see what we want to see, things that will confirm what we're looking for. We find what we're looking for rather than we see what's there. But as I say, it was always a spiritual thing. I've never been impressed by these miracles. For me, the verses about the development of the fetus and so on was just a statement of fact. The Quran always speaks throughout. it says, look at these wonderful things in nature which you know about. It was speaking to the people at the time. It wasn't speaking to a handful of people 1,400 years later who would, consult GCSE science books and say, look, there's a miracle there. No, it was speaking to the people at the time, and it was saying, look, you know this. You see the rain coming down and bringing the earth to life. You see, look at how the camel is made. Look at how the creation is made. Look at the sun and the stars and the moon. Look at these wonderful things. Look how a baby is made. Look how you're made out of a little drop, and so on. These are things you know. Well, Allah did it, and Allah is great, and you should worship Him. That was how I looked at it, and that was what moved me, and that was what I've always believed. And to be honest with you, I'm 52 now. I was a Muslim for 48 years, and throughout the 48 years, whenever people brought up things like scientific claims, I always thought they were ridiculous. I thought it was a way of kind of saying, oh, Islam really is true, whereas before I was in doubt. It was like, to me, hang on, why do you need that to prove? To me, it was about faith. It's about Iman, and your Iman goes up and down, and you have to strive to keep your Iman strong. So to me, the scientific miracles were never an issue when I was a Muslim, and they are certainly not an issue now. I find them absurd. I find it absurd, the very idea that God would leave little clues for generations later, Actually, to be honest with you, I find Hamza's position now a bit more credible. I think his position now is that, well, the Quran is not wrong. He doesn't go along with this idea of a lot of people say that there's a miracle, that the Quran is proved true by this scientific miracle. His position now has shifted a little bit, which I think is probably more realistic, or more defendable, if you like, because the Quran is very vague and ambiguous in its language, and it can mean many things. And so, I have no problem with a Muslim believing, that the Quran is from God, and I've got a Muslim family who believe that, and I have no problem with that. I only have a problem when someone comes to me and says, if you don't believe this scientific fact, then you are a liar, or you are arrogant, or you are evil in some way. That's when I have a problem. I don't have a problem with saying, this is my faith, I believe in it.
Back to on that.
Before we go on, can I just say something?
Yes.
What I did was, I know it's not an important thing, but I just want to make a point, is that Jam Shady said that he said Hamza was on a course, and I said no, he said he thinks he's on a course. Well, as the example PZ Myers earlier, where two people disagree, but there is an objective way to test who is correct. I went and looked back over the Twitter logs, and I must say that I was incorrect, and Jam Shady did explicitly say he is doing a course that weekend. So in this case, Jam Shady, I'm sorry, you were correct and I was wrong.
No problem. Thank you for saying that.
Hassan brought up that you'd like to talk about. I'd like to know. Okay, now, so you are.
Can I
I'm sorry. What exactly? You work for the IERA? Because I didn't know that. Apparently you and Rationalizer have been exchanging messages. You came on. The only experience I have with you is when you came on the show previously, and I didn't know that.
I'm involved with them. I don't think it's necessary to go deep into specifics as to what the nature of the involvement is, but yes, I do have.
Well, that makes you sound like you assassinate people for them. I'm not trying to reinforce any stereotypes. I'm just saying that in the West, when you say, the nature of my business relationship with so and so doesn't need. Just saying.
No, there's not. Okay.
I assume you're some kind of a volunteer, and that's fine. I just wanted to.
No, that is it. I do have a volunteer position with them, but there's not one particular area in which I'm involved in terms of the volunteering, because I actually get involved in a lot of different areas. So my position is kind of a little bit more fluid. That's why it's a case of there's not like I have a formal role that, look, this is what you do. Don't step outside of this position.
Jamal Richards, Media Productions Manager.
I'm sorry.
That's correct. Yeah. But can I go back to what Hassan said as well, because before we go too far further on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I actually agree a lot with what he mentioned, in that the Quran doesn't really raise these things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not talking in the sense of, look, I'm going to prove this to you, I'm going to prove that to you. It is pretty much given as a matter of fact. Look at these things. The idea being to encourage the person to think, look, you have a creator. Everything runs according to a process, that there is a master and a controller of everything. Obviously, there's a foundational belief in this, in that we believe that there's a creator in the first place. And we've got strong reasons for believing in that. But pretty much what Hassan said is actually, yeah, it's correct. It's not there as a proof, and it's only been looked as such in recent times because people don't understand the foundational miracle, the foundational proof of the Quran, which is its inimitability. Anytime Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says, look, if you're doubting in this, he said, produce a chapter like it, i.e. showing that, look, it's the inimitability of the Quran itself, which is the foundational thing, that you're never going to be able to do that. The other stuff, yeah, you can reinterpret it, and it also leads to a problem. Some Muslims, they will look at something and they will try and fit reality into what the Quran says, which I think is PZ Myers' point with regards to embryology. But then there are also cases where you can say, look, this is actually what the text says regarding a matter that was unknown at the time, counter to what was known at the time. For instance, one of the things Hamza raises is that the Arabs at the time used to think that the mountains held the sky up. So for someone to turn around and say, actually, no, the mountains have this purpose, completely contrary to what was commonly thought at the time, it turned out to be correct. That's more what Hamza's position is now, in that it doesn't negate the reality. And therein is an implicit understanding that it wouldn't, because it came from the Creator. So it's kind of a proof in the secondary sense. But it's not the primary proof. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it kind of begs the question.
Mountains having roots also, which
Sorry?
means that the Bible talks about mountains having roots, which
Sure.
means that the Quranic thing is not like bringing a radical new thing. Muhammad's just being consistent with his claim to be a biblical, or rather following in the biblical tradition.
Hassan,
Yes,
the word for mountain in Arabic, what is the word for mountain in Arabic, Hassan?
Rawasi.
And is there an undertoning meaning to that word, like it means to anchor, or is there anything along those lines that it means? Or
Jabal, no. Jabal,
No,
but I
okay,
think
I'll just
the
have a
word
guess.
used in the Quran is Rawasi.
Okay.
Can you remember the verse? I'm sorry, I can't remember it offhand. I mean, the word for the word for mountain is Jabal Jibal, but it's also in the Quran it says Rawasi. I can't remember the exact verse, but
Okay, there's a
which
verse.
means the things that are steadfast, or steadfast in the ground.
Okay, so
That don't move, don't shake.
okay, the one verse that I happen to know of is in Surah An-Naba, which is chapter 28, verse 7.
there's 16:15 as well.
Well, Autad.
But anyway,
Autad is, I mean, Watad is a peg, a tent peg. Autad is pegs.
can I also mention something I think is really, really important as well, that the classical Arabic of the Quran is not the same, and I went into this in a lot of detail last time. It's not the same as Arabic being spoken today. Just because someone can, and this is no disrespect to Hassan, and I'm sorry, but this is, as I understand, because I've spoken to many Arabs, as I mentioned last time, I'm actually married to an Arab as well, that just because you speak Arabic or a dialect of Arabic doesn't mean that necessarily this translates into you understand the Quran implicitly. Exactly the same way as many people who speak English now, they wouldn't be able to get the finer meanings of what is Shakespeare actually talking about when he uses the word that he uses. To get an interpretation of something, you have to go back to the classical dictionaries, which is what Hamza did in his embryological work. And I think we need to keep that frame of mind as well, that we can't just go to some person. I'm not sure what your qualifications are, Hassan, in this matter, but we can't just go to a person and say, listen, you speak Arabic, does it say this? No, you don't say it, I'm going to take you as an authority. That's not really the correct way to get to the truth of the matter, if I can just make that point.
Well, I'm just as much as an authority as Hamza is. In fact, I've probably studied more
Hamza's
than him.
Hamza's not an authority. He doesn't claim to be. What Hamza uses as an authority his classical dictionaries, and he says the dictionary gives this definition. What Ed has asked you, he's asked you specifically, what does the word jabal mean, and is there an undertone or underlying meaning to that? If you don't know, or if you know, or anything like that, but we can't take you as an authority. We have to go back to a classical dictionary and say, right, in the dictionary, what does this word mean, and what are the associated meanings with the word? That's my point. Hamza never claims of his own authority that this is what it means. He gives the references and says, in the classical dictionary, this is what it is, and is there for any person to check up independently if they want to.
Yes, like
I mean,
Thumma
I agree. No, that's no. What you're saying is absolutely right, and anyone can go to the dictionary and check. But the problem is that there are lots of different meanings for things, and if you just pick and choose the meaning that you want, then it's a subjective thing. I mean, if you look at the classic tafsirs, for example, they never came up with any of these scientific miracles, and now we're sort of looking back and saying, well, you know, it can also mean this, and we can also give it this meaning, and we can give it this shade of meaning. The problem with scientific claims is that if you're making scientific claims, you need very precise scientific language to prove them, and the Quran doesn't provide that very precise scientific language. It's very ambiguous.
I don't think there's an issue with people who classically translated or provided the commentary on the Quran not coming up with, say, for example, what you're basically coming down to is saying, look, why didn't these people figure out these scientific miracles in the first place? The thing is, to come up with those interpretations, if they don't know it fits reality, they would just assume, okay, this is either an incorrect interpretation of what it actually means, or there's something that we don't know. For example, the Quran does talk about things. I mean, I could mention something to you now, but of course, you wouldn't give it a bit of credibility because science hasn't proven it yet. But in maybe 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, maybe it might turn out to be the reality, in which case my interpretation of it would be deemed correct. And I appreciate what you say that, yes, there's different meanings to different words, and you can take it and you can pick and choose. But the fact of the matter is, there is still a structure to the Arabic language. There's only so far that you can translate it. There's a scope of meaning that you have to work within. And the point being that, regardless of what the Quran says, it doesn't step outside or move away from what reality actually is. So
yeah, there's a scope of meaning, such as Thumma, according to Adnan at the time, absolutely means afterwards. Absolutely. Until such a point as it needs to mean at the same time.
Well, again, as I mentioned before, look, Adnan or anyone else, or Hassan included, do not make the Arabic language. To go for the definition of what a word means, you need to go back to the classical source. That's a prime example as to why that needs to be done. And also, again, I think Adnan thought the ayat said thumma with regards to the muscles rather than fa. So I can't remember exactly I mean, obviously it was a long time ago since I saw the video, but I think we're probably mixing up the different word that he actually thought at the time. He wasn't because don't forget.
Let me jump in here really quick, and then Hassan, I'm sure you'll have something to say about this.
One last point. Sorry.
The problem I've had with, I'm sorry, let me just get into this quickly, Jam.
Okay.
The problem I've had with a lot of argumentation from the original Arabic choice of words and vocabulary is that many Muslims who, first, if they don't speak Arabic natively, I think they do this maybe without knowing what's wrong. If they are native Arabic speakers, then I would have to go out and accuse them of dishonesty. But what they will do is they will treat every cognate word as though they're necessarily synonyms. And I think that is very damaging to the underlying case. They will say that everything that comes from the same consonantal root is necessarily interchangeable. But the fact of the matter is the consonantal root system that the Semitic languages are based off of, it does help to preserve idiomatic or the core morphology of those words over time. The problem is that it's very limiting, and you have a hard time coming up with new vocabulary words, which is why even the Quran includes many loan words from surrounding language families. But also, if you have, let's just make up a triconsonantal root, and it's used to mean a chair over time, and a new term a new idea comes into focus, well, what will happen is sometimes a new idea will be forced to share the same space as an existing consonantal root. But they're not necessarily the same word. And what I found is that people like Hamza, when you really check up on their work, what they're saying, they're treating all of the different cognates as though they're necessarily synonymous with one another. And that, I think, is, to people who are knowledgeable about the subject, it's dishonest. To people who aren't knowledgeable, I could give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they're making an honest but very serious mistake. And maybe Hassan could address that a little bit more.
Let me interrupt. I really have to leave in a few minutes.
Okay.
If there was...
isn't the show... I think the show is only going to last like 6 more minutes anyway.
No, PZ's a special star guest. He can leave 3 minutes before the show finishes. He has that prerogative.
Get your tongue out of his ass, come on. We had Miriam freaking Namazi on last week, and she stayed for the whole show.
I was on an aeroplane, I don't care.
Okay, I'm willing to stay the whole show, but I'm warning you that at 5 o'clock my time, I do have to leave. But...
Yeah.
Otherwise,
have we got any callers? Because being as like PZ's on, it would be nice to, if anyone else is trying to get on to talk to him, are there any other callers? We might get one more in PZ before we go.
I don't think there'd be enough time to cover the topic. You know what? Actually, do you want to run this episode into overtime, because we do have a lot of callers and we're in the middle of something pretty good. It'd be a shame to end it on this note. Do you want to go for a 3-hour show? This
was a question someone asked me in text, and he couldn't call into the show because of his current situation. He wanted to know, I don't really know if there's a proper answer to this. He wanted to know, do you consider the yolk sac to be part of the embryo?
Why, yes. It's derived from embryonic tissue, so it is definitely part of the embryo. Yeah.
Okay, I think the reason that he asked that is because of the claim that the embryo looks like a leech at a certain stage, but in order to do that, you have to look at it at a certain angle and pretend the yolk sac doesn't exist, and so on. So I suspect that's why he wanted to ask. But anyway.
This one is fairly unambiguous. That when you look at the embryo and you look at most of the extra embryonic membranes, not all of them, they're all derived from embryonic tissue, not maternal tissue. So you can actually do genetic tests and sort them out. So, nope, yolk sac is part of the embryo.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do we want to excuse Professor Myers and take the show into overtime? What do you guys say?
Sure, I don't mind.
Well, I'm just happy. I'm happy for PZ to leave at any point he would like to, and thank you very much, PZ, for coming.
Yeah,
it's been a good laugh.
My daughter's in town. I've got to take her out to dinner, so
Okay.
Well, simple yes/no question. Sorry, can I just ask a?
No, I'm sorry.
One yes/no question. Do you mind if we email you with regards to another offer for a debate, PZ? Can we do that?
Like I already said, Jam. That's for your. Yeah. That's just sort of after the show, okay?
Yeah, I didn't want to spam him, but he's already said that's fine, so we'll do that, hopefully.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Nice to speak to you again.
Thank you very much, PZ, for coming along. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. I'm sorry I didn't say hello to you.
Well, hello now, and goodbye.
Hello. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Okay. Anyway, Hassan, you were going to come back to something that I said.
I've completely forgotten what it was. Oh, no, yes. I just wanted to say, first of all, I said to Rash when he was going to do this show that I wanted to take the back seat on this show because really I'm not interested. I've never been interested in this subject. But just for your viewers' sake and also for Jamshedi and for anyone else who wants to know, let me introduce myself. Okay, I was a Muslim for 48 years. I studied at SOAS. I studied BA Arabic. I've got a first-class honours in BA Arabic. I did postgrad studies as well. I translated a part of Zamakhshari Tafsir. I was a member of a Dawah society, and sometimes it's Amir. I was a teacher at an Islamic school. I know Arabic. My father's Egyptian. Now, however, I never claimed to be a scholar. I never claimed to be an alim. I never claimed to be, knowledgeable in everything. I'm just an ordinary Muslim. But I know Arabic, and I have studied classical Arabic. The scientific claims to me have no interest. They had no interest for me when I was a Muslim, and they have no interest for me now. I really think that at the end of the day, you can pull out, because the Quran is so vague and ambiguous. For me, when I was a Muslim, as I said to you before, the Quran always said, look at these wonderful things, Allah did it. And that in enough was emotional enough and quite moving enough. And I think it's, to try and say that the Quran proves that it's true by this way is absolute nonsense, in my opinion. Because you can take words to mean almost anything you want. The Quran's traditional claim was always that it was miraculous language. That was its traditional claim. This scientific claim is complete nonsense for me. And I think that anyone who tries to say this, the Quran is true because of this, is making a nonsense argument. It's as simple as that. I don't have a problem with Muslims who say, well, look, I believe this, and as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't contradict science. I don't have a problem with that. But if they come and they say, no, you must believe this, and if you study it, then you will know it's the truth, then that's absolute nonsense.
Also, just with the point you made before, Jamshidi, about how the Mufassirs would have, if they had known the science, they would have agreed with it. I don't think so. I mean, I'm looking at the Kingdom of Jordan's Royal Al al-Bayt Institute's official translation of Tafsir al-Jalalain, and it says here concerning Surah 88 verse 20, and the earth, how it was laid out flat, and thus infer from this the power of God, exalted be He and His oneness, the commencing with the mention, blah, 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 blah. As for his words, sutihat, laid out flat, this on a literal reading suggests that the earth is flat, which is the opinion of most of the scholars of the revealed law. So that's obviously the ulama there. And not a sphere as the astronomers, al-Hayya, have it, even if this letter does not contradict any of the pillars of the law. So essentially, the scientists believed that the earth was a sphere, as the Greeks had discovered and as the Arabs later verified in their own independent scientific investigations. But according to Jalal al-Din Asyuti here in his tafsir, he's saying that the majority, most of the scholars of the revealed laws, the ulama, believe that the earth was flat, despite what the scientists said. So what you're saying isn't true. Just because we knew scientific fact, that doesn't mean that the scholars would say, so the Quran must be correct. The scholars of Islam. Sure, okay. Go.
Right. Actually, there was a point. I'm sorry, the gentleman in America, I'm really sorry. I don't actually know your name. The one sitting in the chair.
Atheismo.
Oh, I thought you said chap, and you were referring to his icon where it says riveting tail chap.
No. Sorry, I actually only know Klingschor, Ed, and Hassan. I wasn't sure of what your name was, but anyway,
my usual screen name is Atheismo.
Okay, no problem. Right, I did have a point to make to you, but I completely forgot what it was at the time. Can I just come back to regarding the yolk sack? Obviously, the position that Hamza takes, he actually disagrees with PZ Myers on that because of the fact that the yolk sac is separated from the embryo by an extra embryonic feature called the extra embryonic coleum. I'm actually reading this directly from his paperwork, and he provides a reference there. Anyone who wants to go and investigate that, they can download it from the IERA website. But again, there's a difference of opinion here as to whether it is part of the embryo or not. So I wanted to establish the opinion that there is another opinion. Just because PZ Myers says one thing doesn't make it gospel. Right.
Yeah,
with
okay.
regards
On that,
to,
before you move to the next point, on that point, is the difference of opinion between scientists, or is the difference of opinion between a scientist, PZ Myers, and Hamza?
I have no idea. I don't know, actually. He's given a reference here. He hasn't given a direct quote. So I don't know what the reference is.
Is this thing that because what I'm saying is this what Hamza is inferring with a lack of biological training, or is it what the person actually says, that in the science community there is a difference in opinion as to whether it forms part of the embryo or not? Because they're obviously two very, very different things. So just to say, just to assert that there is a difference of opinion, we're effectively talking about the difference of opinion between the teacher and a nursery child, where one of them is qualified to have an opinion and the other one isn't. But if it's a difference of opinion amongst scientists, that's a different issue. So, if you're going to say it's a difference of opinion, then we need to know whose opinion it is a difference of.
Of course, but what I'm saying is there is a difference of opinion. I think Hamza, with regards to another matter, I've forgotten actually what that is, he actually brings forth 3 scientists that disagree with the opinion that PZ Myers takes. with regards, again, this comes down to each individual issue, and I think that's probably best left to PZ and Hamza to do it on stage in front of an audience, and let's break everything down in real time and actually see what the situation is. But I wanted to just raise that there is a foundation for believing in a difference. Okay? Right. To answer Klingschor's point about the Earth being flat, I'm not sure, because he mentions, and I'm just taking this only on what you said. I don't know what all the scholars actually say about it. I'm just taking this on what you said. But the Quran also mentions that the sun and the earth are wound around, the night and the day are wound around the earth, which implies, obviously, the roundness of it. It's not a case of the Quran is preaching that the whole earth is flat. You have to take things in context. When we're walking on the earth, we're walking now, we don't feel the roundness. The earth is, from our perspective, flat, that we can build on it, that we can work on it, that we can live on it. And this in itself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, it's a mercy to you that the earth could have been of a different nature. I mean, if we had a...
Okay.
Hang on,
You're building a
can I make
straw
the
man.
point?
This is
No, I'm
totally
asking-
Let Jam finish.
Please wait.
Right. Essentially, the way the Earth could have been, the way our planet could have been, it could have been a completely liquid planet, maybe, and we would have had a different, issue or something to tackle with. So it could be interpreted as, in that sense, that do you not see how we've laid the Earth flat? That it's as a mercy to you that you can walk along it, that you can live upon it. Again, the other thing, I think I've seen one of your videos where you're talking about the birds.
Don't move on to the next point, because we
I'm not moving on to another point.
You were coming back to something Kling said, so let Kling come back to your rebuttal in turn.
You totally strawman me, man. I mean, I'm not talking about if actually the Quran does say it's flat or not. I'll let Rashman address that right after me. What I was saying is that you made the point that the scholars, the Mufassirs, would have, if they had have known that all this advanced knowledge we have now, they would have said, yes, or they wouldn't have said this exegesis that is anti-scientific about, for example, the embryological stuff. But as I pointed out, well, here's a great example. They knew the world was round because the scientists had proved it, but they were saying, no, we deny it regardless. So so that's it. So what you're setting is irrelevant. That doesn't address it. You're actually addressing if it actually is real or not. You made the earlier point about what the scholars would think if they had the real information, and I pointed out we have an example of that, and it runs contrary to what you said would happen.
Okay, fine. How many scholars of Islam are there? There's
many.
There's many scholars. So just if some scholars don't say one thing, or if another scholar says something else, it doesn't make it reality as far as Islam.
So you made a general statement, right?
Yes.
That the scholars in general would do this, and then I pointed out that your generalization was incorrect, and now you're telling me not to generalize.
No. Hang on. Because you're making up one point based on something else, right? Coming back down to why, I think the original point where this came down to is why don't people, and I'm rewording the
why
original
didn't
point.
the classical scholars get it wrong?
Why doesn't the Quran tell us all these miraculous things beforehand? Because if they didn't know the reality, they wouldn't come up with this meaning. For example, again, going back to just the embryology thing, I mean, it uses, I'll agree, terminology that could be vague. What Hamza has done is shown that actually, no, look at how specific it becomes because of what we know now. It's the knowledge of our reality now which gives more meaning to why this word in particular was used. I think there was a classical example as well on Facebook where the difference between the word with the Greek interpretation of semen, or using the word semen actually in the embryological process. You see that the Quran uses the term nutfa, which is much more relevant than the word money, which is the word for semen, proving that it's not a direct copy. The point being, if those scholars didn't know...
Before you go on, you've made an assertion. Before you go on with that point, I'd like you to qualify that. I'd like you to qualify it. I'd want you to qualify it. In what way is nut for a woman more clear than what the Greeks believed, that it was her seminal fluid? In what way is the word nutfa more clear than what the Greeks called the female semen?
Right. You know what, Ed? The thing is, if I answer this question, we'll go off into another tangent, and I'll never get to be able to answer the original point. And this is exactly why, this is what happened to Hamza on the Magic Sandwich show, this is kind of what happened last time, and you're doing it again, and this is exactly why Hamza can't come on and talk to PZ Myers in this manner.
You're crying victim. You're crying victim. Let's look back at the video footage. Hang on a minute, Klingschor. No, hang on a minute. When this recording goes up, we'll sit there. People will sit there. They will watch you talking for minutes and minutes and minutes while I sat there in complete silence. What I did was said, please, could you explain that assertion? You cry victim and say, you're always interrupting me and you never let me say anything. And I'm afraid that the evidence is going to speak against you when it comes to looking at the upload. If you don't want to prove assertions, just don't make them.
Yeah,
No, hang on. I'm saying what someone else is saying. The nutfa means something smaller of its kind. In context of the woman, it refers to, I think, like I said, haven't studied it in detail, the collection of one egg from a collection of many, many more eggs.
Right, okay. So in classical Arabic in the 7th century...
Well, hang on. Can I make my point to Klingschor?
7th century Arabs had a word for egg, for the woman's egg. Are you saying there was a 7th century word for the woman's egg?
I didn't say that. And now you see one question begets another. And poor Klingschor, the poor guy, I haven't got to answering his question yet.
That's because you're making assertions. You just asserted that it also means...
Of course you make an assertion. To make an argument, you have to make an assertion. I'm sorry, I am interrupting you now because I don't... Right.
It's a false assertion. They didn't know about eggs, so it couldn't have meant that.
Hang on. We're not talking about the Arabs now. The term nutfa itself is more definitive than the term money, which I think is the difference now. And now I've kind of forgotten what I was trying to say to Klingschor. I'm sorry,
It's more than that. Now it also means the woman's egg because now we know that the woman's egg exists.
Which, again, it doesn't negate reality. It doesn't negate reality. Again, you're talking from a perspective that you believe...
So you're changing Arabic. Arabic is being changed post... No, Arabic has been changed post hoc. So now that we know this stuff, the Arabic gets changed to reflect this stuff. What did it originally mean? Was there any indication of the female egg in the original Arabic, or back when the original Arabs understood it?
Okay.
No.
I already gave you an answer. From my perspective, as I understand the term nutfa, it means one item. It can mean one item from a larger collection of items, i.e., one sperm out of a whole load that is ejaculated in one go, and one egg.
Who told you this?
Wait, everyone. But nutfa at its core, no matter what other kind of connotations you think it might carry, nutfa is essentially like a drop of some liquid. So I don't understand how you get from something that says that to spermatozoa or an ovum. That's what we're having a problem with. How do you make that leap?
You check the classical dictionary. Like I said, I'm not defending and I'm not arguing this
classical
word.
Dictionary?
What's the one that Hamza uses? I forgot.
Lane's lexicon?
Yeah, so you'll have to look up where he got that interpretation from and refute that interpretation.
I can already tell you that this investigation, and I'll happily do it. I always do. I always take the bait and look these things up, even if I just am certain that they're wrong. I still end up taking the bait and looking them up. But I can tell you that there is no evidence anywhere ever of them taking the any word based off the consonantal root meaning a drop of a sticky liquid and saying that it means a microscopic tadpole-like creature or an egg like a chicken would lay. They must have had a word.
I didn't make that assertion.
I'm not saying you're making that assertion. What I'm saying is that you are not just stretching the... what I'm saying is that the meaning that you've given to the worm nutfa is far beyond...
Sorry, can I do what Ed does? It's not a meaning I've given. It's a meaning from the dictionary. It's annoying, hang on. It's annoying, isn't it? It's annoying, isn't it?
What is?
You're saying... Because you said the meaning I'm giving. I'm not giving the meaning. This is what I understand the dictionary is.
Well, okay,
so
if you're arguing by proxy, then I will expect you to countenance his position. Okay, it's too late for you to say it's not your position. We're arguing against the position. We don't care where you got it from. I'm arguing against that position.
But you said it's a position that I've established, and I'm saying no.
Jason, come on. Our usual civility is breaking down a bit.
I know it's annoying, isn't it? And this is my point.
No, it's not annoying. It's. I don't think you understand. So you don't. So then you're not making the claim.
Stop, everyone. Jam, I understand what you're saying. That you're relaying your best understanding of Hamza's position. I respect that. But I'm arguing against the position no matter what it is, okay? Colloquially, I say you as in you, plural, as in people who have taken this position or who have argued its case, even playing devil's advocate. Understand? What I'm saying is that anyone, whether you or anyone else, Hamza, anyone else, are saying that the word nutfa now means, in addition to its previous meanings, also a fluid which can contain spermatozoa or the female ovum. This is a meaning given to this word, a connotation that is far beyond any reasonable elasticity that the original morphology of the word could have allowed for. Okay, now, I'm sorry, I got a little crowded there for a minute. I'd like to hear your response.
Right. First of all, can I just show that this constant interjection just on which word is being used, it's very annoying because it doesn't permit anyone to make a point. I've actually forgotten what the original point was I was trying to make to Klingschor.
Oh, I can remind you if you want.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer it if I can answer it fully without having to qualify each and every different thing.
No.
Right, hang on, I'll come back to that because I want to come back to this now first because I've got the page open. On the original version of Hamza's work, on page 12, I don't know if you guys have got a copy, but we'd be happy to send you one. By looking at the Arabic language, it can mean a dribble, a trickle, a drop of semen, and he's got a reference here which is to the Dictionary of Modern Arabic. So, blah, 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 blah. Nutfa can also mean a singular entity. Hang on, wait. Nutfa can also mean a singular entity which is part of a bigger group of its kind. Therefore, a nutfa could be a single sperm from a collection of millions of sperm contained in semen, or a single female egg from a group of many other eggs in the ovaries. And he's got another reference for that, which is the Lisan al-Arab Dictionary, Book 5, page 725. Again, I'm taking that as a reference and as an authority. I haven't looked at that book myself to see if it's there, but I'm going to assume for the purpose of the point I was trying to establish that it is true because I have no reason to believe it's not.
Except that they had no concept of sperm, and people generally don't go around inventing words for things that don't exist. It is the point. It's exactly the point. If you look at the word sperm that we use now, the Greeks used to have a word for sperm, but it just literally meant seed. But now that we've discovered there are little swimmers inside the semen, we call those the sperm. But the Greeks didn't know about sperm. They were just talking about the stuff that comes out. We've now taken that old word, which used to mean something similar, and decided, in this case, we will now call the little swimmers the sperm. And what's happening is people are saying nutfa now also means the egg inside the woman, but the Arabs at the time did not have a word for the egg inside a woman because they didn't know it existed.
Right. Can I answer that for I don't know how many times? I'm taking the meaning of nutfa as mean one item from a collection of larger items. I think Hassan can probably back me up. There are many words in the Arabic language. They just have like a general meaning, and then you apply them in a specific context. So in the context of nutfa meaning one from a larger collection, we can imply that as meaning one sperm from a collection of larger sperm that get ejaculated in one go, and one egg from a larger collection of eggs. Nutfa itself is completely different to mani, which is the semen itself. And I think this is the crux of Hamza's point, that the Quran uses the term nutfa, whereas if it had used the term mani, it would have been a mistake.
Can I just come quickly, Jamshedi? Can I just quickly come?
I'll leave that decision to Klingschor, because
I agree with you. I agree with you that if you say to me that nutfa, if you said to me, I believe nutfa means that, I would say, fine, Jamshedi. You know, lakum dinakum waliya din, yani, whatever you like. Yep. If you say to me, it definitely means that. It definitely means that, and if you don't believe that, then you are evil or bad or arrogant or whatever. Then I have a problem. Do you understand?
I'm saying it means that the source we have is a dictionary or some kind of an academic reference. That's all I'm saying.
So you believe that?
I'm not saying it's like a.
You believe that it means that, or it definitely means that?
I believe, according to academic resources, that's what they say the term means, and obviously I'm going to take that because I have no reason to disbelieve it.
I also have an academic source here. This is the Lane Lexicon of Arabic, and nutfa is simply the sperma of a man. This is on page 3000.
And how does that differ to mani?
Because it's simply the sperma of a man. No zygote, no female egg, no multiple. It simply means, according to Lane's lexicon, which, Hamza and Adnan refer to in their presentations, it is simply the sperma of a man. But here's the link. There's photos of the, it's in the first column, zoom down.
Where's the link? Oh, you can, hang on. I'm on my phone, so I'll have to check that later. Right.
I see it says sperma of a man and of a woman.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Anyway.
Oh, sperm of a woman. So then this is in line with the Greek idea then of men and women both having semen. Interesting.
Well, I mean, women have a kind of ejaculate. I don't know if so I'm sure that's what they're referring to. But at any rate.
Again, not getting into an argument in linguistics as well. I think.
Well, but I know it's too late for that. It's way too late for that. As a matter of fact, there was a point. I hope you don't mind if I raise this. I'd like to kind of. I think both people have made their points as far as the minutia of what the word meant. I hope I'm not cutting off anything too important from you, Jam. But it's too late to avoid an argument about linguistics. But here's something I've been wanting to raise for a while. And can you see this clearly? If I put this image up. Not everyone in the room will necessarily recognize it, but can you clearly see the outline of what I've done there in pen? Okay.
No, hang on. What is it? It's
just a symbol. It's a Chinese character.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
Now the reason I hope you're not driving on and talking on your phone when you do this.
No, I'm in my room.
Okay. All right. I mean, we have our disagreements, but I'd hate to think you were on your way to assassinate for someone in the IRA and you wrapped yourself around a telephone pole. I'm just teasing. But the reason I bring that up is, and I'm just going to keep this held up here. They will say that, people who think that the Quran is a divinely revealed text, they'll say that this particular form of Arabic was the ideal language to embody the message of God, and then they will immediately say that the maybe not the syntax and core morphology has changed, but all of the idiomacy has changed. So much of the language compared to modern Arabic, it's all changed a great deal. And even though, to an extent, I think that like the Semitic consonantal root-based system is good at preserving literal meaning, I think it doesn't apply to poetic interpretations of it. But when they say that it's the best language to preserve meaning, I think that God, in his infinite wisdom, should have shopped around a little bit more. Because, for example, we're talking about this word can mean that, can mean this, can mean this, can mean that. Okay, in Chinese, in Mandarin Chinese, which is the lingua franca of the country and also prominent in Beijing and many of the northeastern coastal areas and in the Central Plains, which is kind of like China's Han heartland, this character means gold. Now, here's the thing. If you go to Shanghai, a lot of people there speak Mandarin as well, but locally they speak a language called Wu. And in Wu, this character is pronounced differently, but it still means gold. And if you go down to southern China into Guangzhou, you'll find people speaking Cantonese. And again, they pronounce it a third way with a different tone and different pronunciation, but it still means gold. And if you go to Taiwan, for example, and find people speaking Hakka, they'll pronounce it a fourth way, but it still means gold. And so you have a situation where people of all these different Chinese languages, they're when they speak.
You cut off them.
Oh, wait.
I'm sorry. Is my audio volume cutting?
No, for 1 second, for a couple
3
of seconds.
You just cut out.
Yeah, it was just a network thing.
Okay. Anyway, so at any rate, wherever when people from different let me wrap this up. I'll try to be brief.
Different people use the same symbol. I just want to back up to the point where you cut off.
Gotcha. Anyway, let me wrap this up. I'll be brief about it. Okay. So you have different people from different parts of China who can't understand each other when they speak, but they can write this down, and they all, from all corners of China, from the Taklamakan Desert to the mouth of the Huanghe, they can all understand this written character means gold. And in Japan, they also use Chinese characters, also in South Korea and Vietnam. And whenever they use these characters, they pronounce it a different way, and it means gold. And if you were to write this in Portuguese, it would mean gold. And if you were to write it in Russian, it would mean gold. And if you were to write it in Isisa from South Africa, it would mean gold. And if you were to write it in Tasmanian, if you were to write it in Urdu, if you were to write it in Farsi, if you were to write it in Bulgarian or Basque or whatever, it would always mean gold. So I think that the games that the games that people play in defense of the terminology used in the Quran is essentially undermining the offense or the positive arguments made, and that is, they will say, well, this is the ideal language, the ideal time and place linguistically to convey these ideas, and it was the ideal way to preserve them. And then they'll point out how much it has not been preserved, how much it's changed, and how much alleged mystery has been introduced since the time it was written. I'm sorry, I know that went on a little bit long, but I thought it was something I had to raise. Because if the Quran or the Bible or anything like that had been written in Chinese, I think we'd be having far fewer of these disagreements, for better or worse.
Okay. Can I answer that now?
Of course, go ahead.
Yep, right. I think this is very, very similar to an issue that Hassan and I actually agree on with the, in quotes, scientific miracles in the Quran. That many people can claim many things. It's not necessary for other people to then justify it. In terms of Arabic being the best language that the Quran could have been revealed in, yes, I have heard this claim from Muslims. I don't understand the basis for this, but I might do, because actually there's a scholar who's going to be discussing this coming to the UK on the 23rd, 24th and 25th to a session I'm hoping to attend. So I might be able to come back and actually answer you as to why that is actually the case. For now, I have absolutely no opinion on the matter because I don't know. So I'm going to go back to the position of whether it's a true claim or it's a false claim. It's not one that I'm recognizing due to lack of knowledge, exactly the same way as this whole, you reading science into the Quran. I don't want to read something into it that may not actually be there.
So you don't actually, you've said again and again, you actually don't know. So then, if you don't know, then would you agree that you should not at any point?
So I got to stop you there, Kling. I mean, I respect that, frankly. I for one,
I do too.
I think that Jam stands head and shoulders over most of the theists that I have had discussions with.
No. All I'm saying is that if you don't understand the Quran miracles, then would you agree that you shouldn't promulgate them?
Well, I'm not saying that it definitely says this. Again, let's go back to the embryology thing. I'm again using Hamza's work as the foundation for my belief in what it says. If you guys can refute that, and I know there's been a lot of effort to do so, which actually can I also just mention as a side point, that's a really, really good thing, because from our perspective, I don't want anyone to think that we don't like challenges or refutation, because it just makes us work harder and makes the text stronger or anything like that, or makes us recognize if there are any holes there. But I'm using that as a foundational basis to believe this is what I think it says. If we had to have intrinsic knowledge of everything, we couldn't live. We have to trust people in a lot of different parts of our lives, and this is no instance. So I'm actually happy to say that, yes, the Quran talks about embryology. It doesn't negate reality. And the basis for my believing that is this recent work done by Hamza Zotzis, where he has a lot of references and things like that that can be checked up. And I haven't seen any underlying cutting argument from the other side. I'm happy to make that as a statement.
Okay, there's something I'd like to pull you up on, is that you said, I don't remember the exact word you've just used, but you said something about it's good that people are making these responses because IERA do like to be challenged.
I didn't use the term IERA.
What did you say?
I said we. I didn't say IERA.
Well, I thought that we were specifically... No, please, Klingschor. I thought that we were specifically talking about Hamza's done this research. You're trusting in what Hamza has discovered because you trust his research. And we like people to make videos challenging us. So I thought that in that context, the we were talking about was the people who did the research. With that in mind... I would like to point out that the Rationalizer on YouTube is blocked from IERA UK YouTube channel and also blocked from the Calling the World Back channel, as is Captain Disguise, and we haven't been on there using profane language or anything of the like. The only reason that I can think that we are actually blocked is because we're disagreeing with the content of the video, and because of that we have been blocked. And I have asked Hamza a number of times if he can look into it, which he obviously hasn't been able to do anything about it. So being as you appear to be saying that IERA do like to be intellectually challenged, I would like you, if you wouldn't mind, to look into that for me and have the block from the Rationalizer on IERA UK removed, also the Calling the World Back channel removed, which was only added I think yesterday, and also Captain Disguise to be unblocked as well, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Right, okay. I think you've made a huge speculation in a lot of what you've said there. First of all, in a general context, when a group puts forth research to say, look, as Hamza has done here, it's not, and I'm saying this as a Muslim, it is not a credible position for us to just arbitrarily say, look, this is what it says, you must believe it, matter of fact. Because if we don't invite challenges to it, there's no essentially substance to what we're saying, isn't it? If we believe that we're on the truth, we also have to be prepared to defend that position. So when non-Muslims or anyone challenges that position, from our perspective, it's a good thing, because if we're not able to defend that position, it must mean there's something wrong with us, and it makes us re-examine ourselves. I'm talking in that context. As for a specific instance of the accounts that you've mentioned being blocked from YouTube channels, whatever have you, I'm not responsible for that, and I'm not sure as to why that could be, because there could be many reasons. You've made an assumption there that it might be because you're making videos against it. I would probably speculate that it's maybe due to the language or the tone, or maybe the direction that conversations tend to go. Just citing a recent example, that you've been on Hamza's page a lot, practically hounding the guy and insulting the guy to come and chat to PZ Myers. And we've repeatedly said that that's not going to happen.
What were you doing here? I have a hard... by that logic, we should block you. I have to cry foul, Jam. You were very consistent with PZ, very similar challenging to come out. I have to call foul on you.
Call foul on me in 1 minute. On that basis, the other things that were being mentioned on the other channels, I have no idea, but it's not for me then to go to the people in charge of that and saying, listen, you need to unblock it for whatever other reason. I'm sure whatever reason they made, they must have had a decision for it. Hamza and you seem to have some kind of a relationship. I'm not sure what that is, but he has more control over his page. So, to my knowledge, you're still free to post there. And being as he's the main person actually making most of these claims, you'll probably get more responses there anyway. But I think the crux of the matter is...
No, all I'm saying...
The two things are not synonymous. As for me not being able to come here, I've come because you guys want to have this conversation between Hamza and PZ Myers. I want to have that as well. And I want to speak to PZ Myers in front of you guys as witnesses, because there obviously have been emails previously, and put the offer to him, put our position to him. I have the authority to do that, and just see what his response is. I'm sorry it took so long, because there was discussions as to why it doesn't work and this and the other. But essentially, from my perspective, I would have been happy just saying, look, we want to offer you a platform. We can discuss the format. We're very flexible. We'll cover all the costs. Can we get in touch with you about that? And from my perspective, that's pretty much it.
Okay, just what I'm saying is, if IERA welcome the challenge, then can you speak to someone about unblocking the Rationalizer and Captain Disguise from Calling the World Back and IERA UK?
I can mention it to them, but again, they're under no obligation to do as I have asked.
No, they are absolutely not under any obligation whatsoever to hear the counter-argument. I agree.
Okay. There's no counter-argument. They must have I'm listening to you now. I don't know the reason. I'm listening to you.
I'm not saying the counter-argument. I'm not saying the counter-argument as to why I'm blocked. I'm talking about the counter-argument to the videos that they're posting. They have no obligation to hear my counter-argument to the videos that they're posting. I completely agree. But in the spirit of the fact that, as you said, if they can't defend their position, then their position is worthless, how about letting me come in so that they've actually got something to defend against?
Okay, I don't think the IERA UK channel and Calling the World Back channels, they're there to propagate scientific miracles and research and things like that. That's more of their angle from there is to propagate the message of Islam, and they're trying to show the positive aspects rather than wasting time and resources just talking back to you. Because let's be quite frank, you do actually consume a lot of resources in terms that you have a lot of time to spend on the channels, raising a lot of videos, raising a lot of issues, and it's hard work keeping up actually, because we do have full-time jobs and things like that as well. As I mentioned earlier, I'm actually just a volunteer with IERA. So I'm sure they must have a decision for it. Hamza's happy for you to stay on his channel so long as you keep comments on topic, I suppose. But yeah, I'm not happy to speak to them purely on the basis that you want to be able to challenge their position, because I don't think the position that you're challenging is the same position as the position that they're making on those channels. They have a specific agenda.
Well, to be fair, the video in question that I tried to challenge was actually a video that Adnan had mentioned, that Adnan had created, in which Adnan was falsely representing my position on something and had made a video in which he mentioned me, completely strawman my position or got it wrong, and then wouldn't allow me to counter-comment on it because he blocked me as soon as I did. Now, I'm sorry, but you don't get to tell... You don't... This was yesterday. He made a video in which he said, on Calling the World Back, Hamza and Adnan both made videos. Hamza made one saying how PZ Myers was an intellectually dishonest person. Adnan made one saying that PZ Myers had accepted defeat, and the Rationalizer had changed his position to say, whereas before I used to say the Quran is wrong, and now I'm not saying it's wrong anymore. And I pointed out, if you go and look at my video at this exact point in time, there's a big word that says wrong on the screen in 1080 by 720 in black bold with an exclamation, and said, clearly I haven't changed position whatsoever. So, I don't think that it's a valid position to say that this isn't a subject that's up for debate. If he's going to make a video and specifically mention me by name, mention my video, and then misrepresent my position, no, the Rationalizer. The Rationalizer has made it.
Rationalizer.
No, I'm talking my name. The YouTube channel. We're talking YouTube channels.
Fine.
He mentioned my YouTube channel. He mentioned my video. He falsely presented my position, and then he blocked me so that I could not contest that he had falsely represented my position. That is not honest debate. And you can't say these aren't subjects that can be debated. Well, if he doesn't want to debate the issue of whether my video's right or not, don't mention my video in your video.
Okay, I think Adnan is perfectly at right to mention whomever he wants in his videos and to discuss with whomever he wants. There is nothing stopping you from making your own video. I don't think Adnan was inviting debate. Again, I don't know the exact reasons why, so I'm not going to speculate as to people's motivations or their reasons behind it, because I could speak to them and they could come up with a reason as to, look, Mr. Rationalizer, he said this, he said that, look, here's the evidence, this is what he said. They could justify their position, possibly. I'm not saying they are. But at this point in time, I don't see a reason for me to go and start saying, listen, you need to unblock this guy because we need to have a debate, because they're not inviting debate. They're not inviting debate, and there's nothing there. There's nothing they're preventing you.
Don't come back, Rationalizer, because I'm about to say goodbye for now to Jam.
There's so the last point is there's nothing there basically to stop you from making a video saying, look, Adnan's made this claim against me. This is the reality. Here you are. Viewer, please make up your own mind for yourself.
Can't hear you if you're talking Atheismo. You got your mic muted, I think.
Absolutely brilliant. I'm going to say goodbye to now for Jam. Jam, as always, thanks for coming on the show. You're always welcome back. And if you have any other...
Assalamu alaikum, Jam.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Anyway, and if you have any other Muslim friends or acquaintances who would also like to come on, or at least come and join us in the chat, they're also welcome. Thanks as always, and take care.
Problem. All right, cheers.
See you next show, maybe. And, we have a whole backload of people. Okay, I tell you what, We have.
I just have one point to make on that.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not inviting debate. Right. But Atheismo, the thing you were talking about earlier, which I'm going to completely falsely misrepresent as you said that you were wearing women's clothes, you were wrong on that, right? And I'm not inviting a debate.
Maybe you have me confused with DPR Jones, and we're thinking of his old videos where he wore a bra. Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, I don't like to touch on the subject because Jam's gone now and he can't respond. But I have to say, all I think you're asking, all I think any of us are asking, and this is, I hate to say, oh well, this is typical of all, theists, but it certainly has been a very consistent pattern in that they have a real problem either shitting or getting off the toilet. They'll talk right at you and then disable your counter discussion. And everyone, I think, it has a point. I mean, there's certainly lots of people on. I don't have anyone blocked at the moment, I don't think. But, there comes a point where you just get tired of interfacing with some people, and the block button looks pretty tempting. I can understand that. But to continue to speak after you've sewn someone else's mouth shut, or even denied them equal access to your forum, I do think that's sending mixed messages, if nothing else. But let's move on, because, like I said, the person who was providing counterpoint is gone, so I'd like to not talk about this any longer. Okay, since we have about 20 minutes left in the show, which has become a 3-hour show spontaneously, I'm going to ask people to come in, ask their question, and I'm going to kick you off, and then the panel will discuss it, okay? So, assuming these people haven't all left or died of old age at their computers, here is Eric, who has 2 questions for us. Eric, thanks for joining us.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Great. So I actually had a question for PZ while he was on. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be happening. There's the other thing I wanted to ask was, it seems like this whole thing has started a real furor over at IERA. They're talking about publishing all of these papers about M theory, geology, a bunch of other stuff, at least on their Facebook page. And I mean, I'm just curious from your guys' perspective, are there any other sort of pseudoscientific claims that we can expect out of them? Like, is there going to be a paper about like Quranic genetics or like Quranic quantum theory that we all get to read in a few months?
No, let me just confirm this. You've got a source where IERA say that they're going to bring out a paper on M theory. You can't be serious,
dude. The Rationalizer. It's on the Facebook page. It's on the
paper about what?
M theory. Like string theory, except even more hard to understand.
The superset of string theory. They take string theory, which no one understands, and says if you combine it with these multiple other things, which are equally as difficult to understand as string theory, and then are really clever enough to be able to meld them all together and make them work, this explains the universe. And
guys, Rash, you are going to get pwned hard when they bring that paper out, because the original Quran in its first, but wait for it. The original Quran compiled by Uthman did not have any of those signature markings. Okay, it was a true abjad without the. It looked just like a piece of string run 300. Long before modern scientists, in all their egotism, were even on the threshold of understanding the basics that they would need to even postulate such a thing as string theory and name it. The entire Quran is just one long string, but it all comes together.
I know what it's like to laugh and cry at the same time.
It was right under your nose the whole time.
No, we can't have Quran and M theory. I'm sorry, I know it's a good giggle, but no, I'm sorry. I can't. I've got to see something that funny can't be real. I've got to see it with my own.
Can I just say one more thing about that? It's he said on his Facebook page that he wants to publish a paper on why M theory is important to believing in Allah. And he's found some grad student who's willing to work with him on it. Like, And on top of that, like Hawking and Milad now, as all of you guys know, just published this entire book on why M theory says the universe can exist from nothing. Like, I really look forward to how that's going to shake out. Like,
I remember Steve Hawking being on TV and saying, and therefore we don't need God to light the touch paper.
Yep, that's basically it.
Eric is correct. Here's the quote. This is Hamza on Facebook. I just had a fascinating meeting with a postdoctorate physicist researching M theory at Durham University. We have agreed to work together on a very interesting paper providing good reasons to believe in God. It will be based on new research that has not yet been popularized. On a side note, he raised a very interesting point. He said, physicists do not always look at the philosophical implications of their work. I'll keep you updated.
Yeah, that's why. That's why, like,
I tell you what,
yeah, like write all these books about it. Wonderful.
Yeah, you've got to admire Hamza's ability to set high goals. he's gonna learn everything.
I mean, my respect for Hamza Sortzis will exponentially increase if he can understand M theory. Like, now we have to take him seriously. Like, anybody who can even try to understand M theory, like, Christ.
I'll tell you what, he can make any video he wants. You know, look through the Quran. The word nutfa means M theory, and you know what? I won't dispute it because there's no way I'm learning M theory to prove him wrong.
Yeah.
You messaged me you had 2 points. Was that just the first?
That was the first. The second one I wanted to actually ask to PZ, but I actually came up with something else. Hello? You guys cut out on me.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. There's actually something else I wanted to discuss. I thought it's kind of interesting that whenever the subject of evolution comes up, Hamza and Adnan kind of have this habit of saying, like, oh, we don't really, like, evolution's not in the Quran, we don't really want to talk about it. And then when talking to Richard Dawkins on that YouTube video, he talks about, he makes up some bullshit about how, like, evolution is like a non-complementary paradigm to, like, things found in physics. Like, I wonder what your guys' opinion is. Like,
I am really glad that you brought this up because I was going to bring this up, but I was going to have to just bring it up randomly. But now you've brought it up. I'm pleased about that. Adnan and Hamza, now they definitely ambushed Richard Dawkins, who was very reluctant to even spend his time talking to them. And then eventually he said, "Okay, come on then, let's talk. Let's talk about evolution." So Hamza has got the opportunity he wants. He really, really desperately wants to debate with Dawkins. Dawkins stands there and says, "Let's talk about evolution. What's your position on evolution?" And Hamza says, "I haven't really got an opinion on it. I don't know much about it." Whereas before this event, Hamza had written an article called "A Response to the God Delusion," and things he says in this are, point number one, evolution does not have its foot in the door. Number two, evolution is based upon incalculable probabilities. 3, evolution is impossible because we have not spent enough time on Earth yet. Now, clearly, that is an unambiguous statement. Evolution is impossible, right? And yet then when he gets in front of Richard Dawkins, Dawkins says, "Let's talk evolution," and he says, "I don't have an opinion on it." And it's exactly the same as when with PZ Myers, he wanted to talk about isostasy and roots in mountains and various different things. And then when it got onto the embryology and they got to this point where, oh, the Quran's wrong, and then it's like, but what about the isostasy? And the trick is never talk to someone about something they're knowledgeable on. So go to a geologist, talk about embryology. Go to a biologist, talk about geology. And whatever you do, don't tell Richard Dawkins you think evolution is impossible.
And I think that the part that we're all missing here is The fact that he has accused PZ Myers up and down on Facebook, on YouTube, on probably somewhere on his website of being utterly cowardly for refusing to debate him. He's published something saying that evolution is impossible. He gets in front of Richard goddamn Dawkins, who, like, as far as I'm concerned, invented a lot of our perceptions of evolution, a lot of our theories of evolution, and just says, I don't have an opinion. And he has the gall to accuse other people of cowardice. This is terrible.
I agree completely. Absolutely. I would rather chat with Dawkins, be made a complete fool of, be shown that I'm absolutely wrong, and say, oh God, I was completely wrong, I've changed my mind.
Yeah, at least we could respect him if he was willing to say that he was wrong. Like,
yeah. Oh, can everyone in the chat see the William Lane Craig icon, the name in the chat with the empty chair? Is that visible to everyone?
Yes.
Watching the stream?
Yeah. I can see it on Blog TV.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that started because William Lane Craig was challenging Dawkins, and Dawkins said, get lost. And so he started setting a chair for Richard Dawkins and always saying that implying that he was afraid to show up. And, so from now on, I think on the MSS, if I can get DPR to agree to it, but definitely on this show, we're going to invite him to every show, and we're going to call him a coward when he doesn't show up, just to show how stupid. And I hope to start a meme to just embarrass this jackass and people like him, people like frankly like Hamza, who go around with this sense of entitlement that just because you challenge the heavyweight champion boxer of the world necessarily means he has to fight you. It doesn't. Maybe these people need to just wake up and smell the coffee that they're not necessarily in the same league, and that if they ever get a title shot with Dawkins or PZ Myers, it's something that they shouldn't look in the mouth, and they will probably be destroyed. It really reminds me of that movie $1 Million Baby, where that really scrawny guy gets in the ring every day at his little rat-eaten gym and raises his fist and says, I challenge the welterweight champion of the world. And he says, well, someone yells at him that he hasn't even fought in a ranked match yet. I don't think it's really arrogant of Dawkins or Myers to say, look, I don't want to do it, and I shouldn't have to excuse myself. I hope that PZ isn't upset with me for allowing so much of the time to be dedicated to, Jam here challenging him. But I didn't feel that it would be good to put any kind of restrictions on what the guest can or cannot ask. The guest meaning Jam. I didn't want to put restrictions on what they could talk about or what they could ask. But let's face it, if somebody doesn't want to debate you, they don't want to debate you. They shouldn't have to give a reason.
Yeah. I didn't mind it. I didn't want to do a restriction on the subject, but I wouldn't have minded a restriction on the amount of time he had asking it.
I think the reason why they're so. I mean, I think the best format to discuss these ideas, like what they're doing, is exactly what Hamza has done. Write an essay, and then we'll look at your essay. In the essay, you say exactly what you think in the best possible words. In the most concise manner, with all your evidence and your footnotes, there it all is. And then we analyze it and conduct a critical analysis of it, with our counter. That's the best format to hash out these ideas. And I think the reason why he wants a debate is because in a debate, in the essay, he's destroyed. We've wrecked him. Well, we've gone through all of his statements one by one, taken them, had a look at his evidence, shown that he's wrong, shown that he's misquoting or that he's quote mining, and so forth, right? But in a public debate, he can save face. He can dance around and claim, oh, yes, and the Arabic means this, that, and the other, blah, 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 set all these fires, and PZ, because he doesn't know anything about Islam, or he knows very little about Islam, he wouldn't be able to, address all these points. Then Hamza would be able to save some face. Whereas in what's currently happening, Hamza is getting his ass kicked. Look at him. He's changing his position. He's gone from the Quran magically predicts science, and it's a signpost to the transcendent. He's gone from that. Now he's back down to, the Quran doesn't contradict science, but what we're not saying is that it predicted advanced science. You know what I mean? So, I just think that's the reason why he's so desperate to have a debate with a formal debate.
And on top of that, all of his debates are packed full of just these sheep who clap for him when he makes the most inane possible points. At some point, I remember watching, trying to watch one of his debates, and he tried to equate an intuitive knowledge with God with intuitively believing that the external world exists, and that if I can intuit that there is a world literally outside of my mind and I'm not plugged into the matrix, that somehow that also means that the external world, that also means that Allah exists and that the Quran is true, and et cetera, et cetera. It's really, G.E. Moore is spinning in his grave right now. He wrote a whole paper on proving the external world way back when. It's ridiculous.
I said what I said before about how sort of pissy and entitled some of the theistic catcallers seem. I will actually go out and criticize PZ Myers and Richard Dawkins to an extent, and say that if I were them, I would do it, because if I had the knowledge and the charisma that they both have, I know that you could just turn right around and demolish these people. So I really think that they would do well. Going back to my $1 Million Baby analogy, that movie would have been so much better if in like the special director's cut, the scrawny guy was in there saying that he was going to beat up he was challenging the welterweight championship of the world, and at that moment, the champion happened to be passing by, went in to use the restroom, overheard it, got in the ring, put on his gloves, and beat the shit out of that kid. That would have made a great addition to that movie. That would have been a great scene. So I really think that in the case of Dawkins and Myers versus Craig or Tsortsis, they have nothing to worry about and everything to gain if they just went and face rolled one of these theistic people and really put them in their place. And then all of the trash talk that led up to it would just be a giant drum roll. I really think they have absolutely nothing to fear, and they should go for it. I think that as a matter of fact, I'm going to you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to follow Hamza around and help him taunt these atheist lecturers in the hope that if we should just join ranks with them side by side, just heckling Richard Dawkins and PZ Myers wherever they go, in the hope that they really will accept and just absolutely stomp on these people, which we all know is what would happen, no matter how the format was gerrymandered in a futile attempt to make it unfairly in the theist's favor. I'll be back in a second, guys. Go ahead.
Can you add a caller?
Yeah. Can you wait? No. Can you add another caller?
Yes. Okay. Who's been here a while? Here we go. Here we go. Kanetatsu Kazama. I hope you're still there.
Can you hear us?
I can. How's it going? Thanks for the invite.
Hi. What would you like to talk about?
It goes back towards the beginning of the show, mostly. Just this sort of sense of being wrong. And I feel like, there's this sort of used car salesman element that I think has been brought up before on a couple of shows. There's this idea that there's the salesman, and he knows what he's selling is not, as advertised. He's concealing information. And then there's the purchaser, and the purchaser is being deceived, obviously. And so it's the salesman's type that I think are, the most obvious, the most dishonest, clearly. And I wanted to get sort of like a feeling of, where do you start the argument with the ones that are being wholly dishonest, clearly, intentionally.
How do you tackle people like I shouldn't say people like Hamza. How do you tackle people who are just flat out liars? Do you mean?
Well, right. I mean, they're going to equate. Well, evolutionists don't say anything about the beginning of the universe, and it's like, well, no one's actually an evolutionist, and first of all, they don't, or a Darwinist, or they repackage it and misrepresent the science purposefully. So it's like, where do you even begin?
I think that you can't actually change their position until someone is willing to search for the truth and nothing but the truth, until someone who is ready to embrace the truth and not what they want to be true, there's nothing you can do to change their mind. But I think, so with someone like that, if they're stubbornly going to refuse the truth even if, it's true, if they're going to preserve what they want to believe in the face of what is actually correct, there's nothing you can do. But by publicly refuting them, you do help to influence the people who are watching. So I think just whenever they make a fact claim, just show it's incorrect. I mean, and I'm sure it can be arduous. I mean, look at Jamshedi. He's making these fact claims, and he keeps on trying to run off and make all these claims, and you have to try and address them one by one. But by exposing the falsehood of these incorrect fact claims that they make, third law of thermodynamics, it disproves evolution, or whatever the hell they say. I'm not very well versed in creationist arguments, but whatever. By refuting these points one by one, although they keep on jumping around, to the people that are watching, they're seeing these points being refuted. So for their benefit, I think, that's my thoughts on it.
I think really when you debate with someone, you very rarely debate with that person for the benefit of that person. The person you're debating with, it's very rare that at the end they will say, you know what, you're right, I've changed my mind. It's just very unlikely to happen. You always debate for the benefit of the audience. You expose some facts to them. You possibly introduce them to a different way of using deductive reasoning, or whatever you do. You do it for the benefit of other people, which is why I won't have a debate with someone unless it's going to be recorded and uploaded somewhere. Because what is the point of talking to someone who doesn't want to listen to what you're saying, unless someone else who is willing to listen to what you're saying is going to listen to it later?
Wrap up the show at the 3-hour mark. We had about half a dozen guests that didn't get to come on the show, so we were really fortunate. And then I didn't keep my word because what Eric raised was actually, I wanted to go on about it at length. I was going to try to quickly get the guests through, and that didn't work out. So if you didn't make it on the show this week, we're going to have another one, same day, same time, 2 weeks from now. And of course, there's also another religious discussion show, The Magic Sandwich. This is essentially the sister show of that one that goes on alternating weeks on Sunday. Hassan, you look like you have something to say?
Yeah, can I just quickly make a very quick plug for another blog TV show, which the first broadcast was yesterday. It's in Arabic, so it's for all those Arabic speakers. It's Arab Atheist Broadcasting. So if you look up Arab Atheist Broadcasting on blog TV, and they've got a YouTube channel as well, which is Arab Atheist Broadcast. The first show was yesterday, and it's I think it was inspired by the Gin and Tonic show. There was Ali and Bassam and Nada, and I was on it as well for a little bit. So, sorry, that's it, yeah.
On YouTube, or are they doing like this, and they're recording and putting it up?
They are recording it and putting it up. I noticed yesterday's show, which was the first show, was put up and then taken down. I don't know whether he's put it back up again, whether he had a problem with editing or something. But the idea is exactly the same as the Gin and Tonic show, but in Arabic.
I can't tell you how happy I am to hear about this. I'm sorry I didn't hear about it sooner. That's terrific. And you know what? I will make an effort to attend, even if I don't understand most of what's being said, and I will just show up as support. And I would advise everyone, if they have a channel, I'm sure we'll post it in the description of these videos when we put it up so people can see. And yeah, everyone sub to the channel, find out when the show is on, and even if you don't speak a word of Arabic, whether you're Muslim, ex-Muslim, never Muslim, show up as support for what they're doing, because I think that's great. I think that's really what is needed at this point.
There's also another thing we've got to say is this show is every 2 weeks, but next week we've agreed to do a 1-hour special on Skeptic TV. Now, if you're English, that's Skeptic spelled incorrectly, SK instead of SC. Skeptic TV next Saturday, same time, 2100 GMT, next Saturday, Skeptic TV on Blog TV. We're doing a 1-hour special of the Gin and Tonic show for Skeptic TV guys who are doing a 12-hour charity event. So if you wanted to get in today and you didn't, then you can actually call us next week rather than having to wait 2 weeks.
For this week, thank you everyone for showing up.
Oh, and a thank you to PZ Myers too for coming on to the show.
Yes, of course, that was great. I mean, how the hell do you get these people on, Rash? You had to. Are you going to have like the Secretary General of the UN on the next show? Maybe we can get Ban Ki-moon on for the Skeptic TV special.
Yeah, you know, when you've got a fantastically waxed moustache, mate, anything is possible.
Bye, everyone.
Ciao.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Later.
Thanks for coming, Eric and Kentatsu.
Thanks for having me.